Shizuku Yanokuji is an ordinary student attending an agricultural high school. One day, while returning home from school, she suddenly loses consciousness. When she opens her eyes again, she finds herself in what appears to be the Sengoku period. As she tries to understand her surroundings, she recalls that it is the middle of April. Earlier that morning, she had dreamed that she was being beheaded by Nobunaga. Even so, she cannot deny that the Sengoku period fascinates her as much as ever. The historical era she loves so dearly continues to excite her imagination. Because of the history books she has been reading, she doubts she will be able to sleep peacefully for quite some time. She often thinks that if she were ever given the chance to serve a great warlord of the era, it certainly would not be Nobunaga. At school, one of her friends comments on her endless habit of filling notebooks with strange historical fantasies and asks how many notebooks she has accumulated by now. Shizuku immediately dismisses the remark and tells her friend to leave her alone. Not long afterward, their teacher announces that the 5th period has been cancelled for the day. While the rest of the class celebrates, Shizuku is the only one concerned about the materials she had purchased specifically for that lesson. She asks what will happen to them, but the teacher casually replies that they can probably be used another time. The answer only irritates her further, considering she had gone out of her way to buy everything in advance. Once classes end, one of her friends suggests going to karaoke together. However, Shizuku apologizes and explains that she must help her grandmother that day. Since school has ended earlier than usual, she intends to return home as quickly as possible. Her friend points out that she seems to spend all of her time doing farm work, even when she is at home. The comment is accompanied by admiration, as Shizuku is known among her classmates as both an agriculture enthusiast and a devoted lover of history. Before heading home, she stops by a bookstore to purchase a book she has been looking forward to reading. As she finally obtains it, she thinks about how close she came to forgetting it. The book is surprisingly heavy, and she cannot help wondering why her older sister could not have bought it herself. As she leaves the bookstore, she suddenly notices the weather changing. It seems as though rain is beginning to fall. After that moment, her memory becomes strangely unclear. She cannot remember exactly what happened between then and the moment she opened her eyes again. Even now, whenever she tries to think back on it, tears begin to flow for reasons she cannot explain. Then she awakens. Looking around, she is immediately struck by confusion. She has no idea where she is. School had ended early. She had visited the bookstore. Afterward, she had gone out for a short ride. Those are the last events she remembers clearly. As she struggles to make sense of her situation, several unfamiliar people suddenly approach her. They stare at her appearance and remark that she is a very strange woman. At first, Shizuku wonders if she has somehow wandered onto the set of a historical film production. However, the appearance of the people around her quickly causes doubt to creep into her mind. One particularly suspicious-looking man catches her attention, prompting her to turn around and run. She desperately attempts to escape, but the man quickly catches up to her. He grabs hold of her and forces her to the ground, preventing her from fleeing any farther. Just as the situation appears hopeless, another individual suddenly intervenes. The newcomer drives the suspicious man away and condemns the group as thieves. He declares that such disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated within the territory governed by his lord. Afterward, his attention turns toward Shizuku herself. Observing her unusual clothing, he questions where she has come from and demands an explanation for her strange appearance. At that moment, Shizuku finally begins to realize the seriousness of her situation. This is not a film set. This is not a historical reenactment. Everything around her appears completely genuine. Before she can process the implications, another voice enters the scene and questions the nature of the commotion. A mounted warrior arrives on horseback. The moment Shizuku sees him, her eyes widen in shock. She immediately recognizes the crest. The katana at his side possesses a golden guard. His attire is eccentric, yet imposing. Every aspect of his appearance radiates extraordinary authority and overwhelming presence. A chilling realization runs through her mind. There can only be one person in all of Japanese history who fits such a description. The man before her is Oda Kazusa no Suke Saburo Taira no Ieyasu Nobunaga. Unable to believe what she is witnessing, she stares at him in complete astonishment. The warrior advances toward her and questions whether she has a death wish. As he steps closer, he places his sword before her. Faced with the overwhelming presence of the legendary warlord, Shizuku can barely think straight. At the same time, a completely different thought enters her mind. She suddenly realizes that she does not even know what name she should use when referring to him. In this era, directly calling a person by their real name is considered extremely rude. Social customs dictate that one should avoid using another person's given name outright. Instead, titles, ranks, family names, and other forms of respectful address are normally used. Remembering this historical etiquette only adds to her growing panic as she finds herself standing face to face with one of the most famous figures of the Sengoku period. For people of higher status, only their closest companions are permitted to address them by their personal names. Even if permission is given, doing so naturally is considered disrespectful and improper. Realizing her mistake, Shizuku immediately drops to her knees and desperately begs for forgiveness. The man observes her for a moment before stating that, under normal circumstances, he would have struck her down where she stood. However, her strange appearance has aroused his curiosity. Because of that, he decides to spare her for the moment and orders her to state her name. Shizuku quickly replies that her name is Shizuku. As she gives her answer, her entire body trembles uncontrollably. She cannot believe that she has carelessly spoken Nobunaga's real name aloud. Not only has she committed a grave breach of etiquette, but now he is personally asking for her identity. She has no idea what will happen to her next. The man studies her carefully. His gaze moves to her neatly trimmed hair. Her clothing is unlike anything he has ever seen before, both in style and material. His attention then shifts to the unusual bag she is carrying. He asks whether the strange item belongs to her. Shizuku immediately confirms that it does. Upon hearing her answer, he orders her to raise her head. Once she does so, he fixes her with a sharp stare and demands to know who she truly is. The intensity of his gaze causes her to tremble once again. She hurriedly insists that she is nobody important. She claims to be nothing more than a very ordinary commoner. The man then asks where her hometown is located. Caught off guard, Shizuku answers that it is in Hinomoto. The man immediately demands to know where this place is. In her panic, she first answers Tokyo. However, realizing that such a name would mean nothing in this era, she quickly changes her answer and claims that she was raised in Nanban. Before the questioning can continue, one of the retainers approaches and informs his lord that they have discovered something inside her bag. The object they present is her smartphone. The man picks it up and examines it closely. Unable to identify it, he wonders whether it might be some sort of mirror. Meanwhile, Shizuku breathes a small sigh of relief. Fortunately, the battery is dead. If the device were to turn on, it would only make her appear even more suspicious than she already does. The man continues inspecting the object and remarks on how fascinating it appears. At the same time, a horrifying thought crosses Shizuku's mind. She suddenly remembers the files stored on the phone, including a collection of weapon catalogs. If they discover those, her situation could become far worse. The retainers begin voicing their suspicions. They state that her behavior is highly suspicious and suggest that she should be tortured until she reveals the truth. The mere mention of torture causes Shizuku to panic. Trembling violently, she desperately begs them not to do such a thing. However, as a sword is brought dangerously close to her face, fear overwhelms her. She falls backward and frantically pleads for them to wait. In a desperate attempt to save herself, she blurts out that she can be useful to them. She explains that she has studied agriculture. The men around her stare in confusion. They cannot understand why she is suddenly talking about agriculture, nor do they see how such a thing could possibly matter. Before anyone can mock her further, the Lord orders his retainers to remain silent. He then asks Shizuku whether this agricultural knowledge is also a form of Nanban technology. Seizing the opportunity, Shizuku immediately agrees. She explains that it represents the latest advancements in agricultural methods. Increased productivity, she claims, leads to a wealthier nation. A richer nation results in a stronger economy, a larger population, more soldiers, and fewer peasant uprisings. The explanation captures the Lord's interest. After listening to her, he declares that he desires her talents. From that moment onward, she will serve him. He informs her that the moment she leaves his service will also be the moment of her death. From now on, she is expected to live solely for his benefit and devote her efforts to his cause. He asks whether his meaning is clear. As Shizuku listens, she cannot help thinking that this arrangement might actually be worse than torture. The scene then shifts to a large residence. Inside, a heated protest immediately breaks out. One man openly objects to the Lord's decision. He points out that Shizuku is a woman and, furthermore, an extremely suspicious stranger whose origins remain unknown. Before he can continue, the Lord dismisses the complaint entirely. Declaring such objections ridiculous, he strikes the man and orders everyone present to abandon their outdated customs. He makes his position perfectly clear. If a woman or a child possesses useful talents, he will make use of them. If they do not, he will simply cut them down. He then informs everyone that Shizuku possesses advanced agricultural knowledge from Nanban. However, he also states that if she ultimately proves useless, she will be discarded without hesitation. After making himself understood, he orders his retainers to prepare a change of clothes for her. Meanwhile, Shizuku can feel the hostile gazes directed toward her from every direction. The pressure is so intense that it feels as though her stomach is twisting itself into knots. Ignoring her discomfort, the Lord immediately proceeds to give her first assignment. He explains that there is a certain village that has failed to pay even half of its annual taxes for several consecutive years. With each passing year, the situation has only grown worse. The village has declined to the point where almost nothing remains except a collection of ruined fields and broken structures. The Lord then announces his decision. Using the agricultural techniques from her homeland, Shizuku is to become the village's chief. Her task is simple in theory, yet impossible in practice. She must transform the village and produce an abundant harvest. The moment those words leave his mouth, Shizuku is completely stunned. She can do nothing but stare in shock as the full weight of the responsibility placed upon her shoulders begins to sink in. Shizuku finds herself in the third month of the year 1565, according to the old calendar. Throughout the village, word begins to spread that a young girl is about to become the village chief. The announcement immediately stirs unease among some of the villagers. One man openly questions the decision, only to be met with a chilling warning that if anyone objects, the entire village will be razed to the ground. The man delivering this threat is Mori Sanzaemon Yoshinari. He is known as one of Oda Nobunaga's most trusted retainers, a man important enough to have once been entrusted with the protection of his lord's castle. Despite his fearsome reputation, his appearance is surprisingly ordinary, resembling nothing more than a plain, elderly man at first glance. The villagers quickly abandon any thoughts of protest and hurriedly declare that they have no objections. Yoshinari then turns his attention to Shizuku and reminds her that his lord has placed great expectations upon her. He instructs her to devote herself fully to the task so that she may live up to those expectations. His words leave a deep impression on Shizuku. Even without raising his voice, he carries the unmistakable presence of a military commander, and she finds him overwhelmingly intimidating. The commander hands over the stipend that has been allocated to her and explains that several soldiers will remain behind in the village. Should any trouble arise, she need only give the order, and they will act. The true meaning behind this arrangement is obvious. The soldiers are not merely there for protection, they are also there to keep watch over both Shizuku and the villagers. After Yoshinari finally departs with his men, Shizuku can no longer hide her feelings. Deep down, she desperately wishes she could return home. However, she knows there is no point dwelling on such thoughts. Since she has been brought here, all she can do is focus on the work before her. Fortunately, she possesses something that may give her a chance to succeed. She has seeds developed through modern farming knowledge, strengthened through selective breeding, and cultivated to be more resilient than ordinary crops. With these seeds, she believes she can at least fulfill the simple order given to her lord. Even so, the situation before her is grim. The villagers are alarmingly thin, and there are very few children among them. The first priority, she realizes, must be improving everyone's nutrition and living conditions. Introducing herself to the villagers, Shizuku explains that although she lacks experience, she hopes to work together with everyone. Using Nanban technology and the improved seeds she possesses, she proposes that they strive for an abundant harvest. The villagers respond warmly. They express their pleasure at meeting her and welcome her as their new chief. However, not everyone is willing to accept her authority. Among the crowd, one misogynistic man suddenly raises his voice, demanding to know why they should listen to the words of a woman. He is not alone. 4 other men share the same sentiment, making a total of 5 openly hostile villagers. Their attitude reminds Shizuku of the harsh realities of the era she now inhabits. In this period, women possess almost no rights. They are often treated as inferior, isolated during menstruation, used as tools for political marriages, and criticized whenever they attempt to speak their minds. Yet history is not entirely devoid of strong women. There are many who refuse to submit to such treatment. One such woman immediately rebukes the misogynistic men and insists that they show proper respect to the village chief. The man responds with even greater hostility, declaring that women and children should remain silent and know their place. A young woman steps forward and points out that if Shizuku had not accepted this position, the entire village would have been destroyed. The misogynistic villager dismisses her argument and scoffs at the idea that someone as young as Shizuku could accomplish anything worthwhile. The group of men stubbornly announces that they intend to handle this year's work according to their own methods, regardless of what the new chief says. In response, one of the women suggests that they simply ignore the stubborn fools and proceed with the work themselves. When Shizuku takes stock of the available labor force, the reality is discouraging. Excluding the 5 uncooperative men, only 10 women and 3 men remain willing to assist her. In an age without machines or modern equipment, losing so many male workers places a tremendous burden upon those who remain. Nevertheless, there is no time to waste. For the moment, Shizuku decides that the best course of action is to inspect the village thoroughly. The settlement consists of 10 households, with a total population of 30 people and only 2 cows. As she expected, the farmland is in poor condition. The soil lacks fertility, and unless compost is produced soon, crop yields will remain extremely low. She also notices numerous uneven patches of ground scattered throughout the fields, creating additional challenges for cultivation. As she continues her inspection, she overhears 2 men talking among themselves. One asks whether they have any plans for this year's farming season. The other admits that they do not. At that moment, Shizuku approaches them and examines a section of farmland that appears noticeably less productive than the surrounding fields. One of the men immediately attempts to dismiss her involvement, insisting that women should not interfere in such matters. Ignoring his remark, Shizuku calmly studies the land and identifies the problem. The field is situated on a slope. Whenever rain falls, water carries valuable nutrients downhill and eventually into the nearby river. As a result, the soil steadily loses its fertility and becomes incapable of producing healthy crops. While continuing her survey, she notices another serious mistake. One of the farmers is applying water and organic material incorrectly. Realizing the danger, she immediately points out that such a method will not work. If the material is simply spread directly across the field without proper treatment, it will attract pests and insects. These pests can then infest the soil, damage the roots of the crops, and ultimately cause the plants to rot before they have a chance to mature. The man dismisses Shizuku's concerns, insisting that nothing can be done about the situation, and claiming that the poor harvest is simply the result of bad plants. Shizuku is about to explain the actual cause of the problem, but before she can speak, the man rudely cuts her off and tells her to be quiet and leave. Looking at the condition of the field, Shizuku realizes just how serious the situation is. There are too few helping hands available, and the men who refuse to cooperate have no intention of assisting with the work. Under such circumstances, accomplishing her mission will not be easy. On the other hand, she still possesses a few valuable resources. Since the contents of her classroom had not disappeared when she was transported to this era, she is not completely without supplies. Among the things available to her are pumpkin seeds, sweet corn seeds, tomato seeds, onion seeds and seedlings, as well as sugarcane. She also still has her cell phone, a manual charger, a medium-sized knife, and a small collection of snacks. Based on the distance and direction from the castle, she concludes that she is most likely in Owari Province, the western region of what will one day become Aichi Prefecture. From a climatic standpoint, she determines that there should be no major problems cultivating any of the crops she possesses. Even so, she still wonders what her next move should be. Sometime later, several villagers arrive carrying large tubs, just as she had requested. Shizuku thanks them for their help and begins explaining the first stage of her plan. The tubs are to be filled with soil, after which they will plant the unfamiliar crops inside. The villagers stare in astonishment. The seeds and seedlings display colors and shapes unlike anything they have ever seen before. Many of them cannot even identify what the plants are supposed to be. Seeing their genuine confusion, Shizuku reaches an important conclusion. The crops that are common in her own time have clearly not yet been introduced to Japan. The realization makes her pause. By bringing these plants into this era, she is effectively altering history itself. However, she quickly reminds herself that if she had failed to produce results, she might have lost her life. More importantly, she wants to believe that preventing starvation and malnutrition can never truly be a bad thing. Putting those thoughts aside, she begins teaching the villagers about composting. She explains that they will create compost and mix it into the soil. Doing so will greatly improve the fertility of the fields and help crops grow more effectively. She further warns them against spreading feces directly onto the farmland. Instead, it should be combined with materials such as straw and rice husks. Through proper decomposition, the mixture will become compost and serve as a highly effective fertilizer. After mixing the ingredients together, the compost should be left to sit for a period of time before use. Once that task is complete, the remaining villagers can begin tilling the fields. Shizuku acknowledges that the work will be physically demanding, especially since most of the laborers are women. Nevertheless, she sincerely asks for their assistance. The women are surprised by her concern. To them, her distinction between men and women seems strange. They point out that among farmers there is no meaningful difference. Everyone works according to their ability, regardless of gender. Encouraged by their determination, the villagers begin working together. The scene later shifts to the evening. One of the women approaches Shizuku and comments that she must be exhausted from all the labor. By this point, Shizuku has arranged to stay with the Lime household. The woman kindly encourages her to eat before resting. Unfortunately, the food situation is even worse than Shizuku initially imagined. The stipend and rice she received have already been distributed among the villagers to help ease their hardships. During dinner, the woman grows curious about something Shizuku mentioned earlier. She asks what kind of place Nanban actually is. Trying to provide an explanation without revealing too much, Shizuku describes it as a place where technology is extremely convenient. However, she also explains that the air is often polluted and that traveling using iron horses can sometimes be dangerous. The description leaves the woman bewildered. To her, it sounds like a rather frightening place to live. Eventually, the conversation comes to an end, and everyone settles down for the night while resolving to continue working hard the following day. As she lies down to sleep, Shizuku cannot help but compare her current situation to her former life. She knows that cotton futons will not become widely available to ordinary people until the Meiji era. The rough bedding beneath her feels incredibly uncomfortable. She misses her soft futon. She misses being able to eat until she is satisfied. She misses taking warm baths. She even misses being able to freely explore the castle and the world around her. Most of all, she worries about her grandfather and wonders whether he is searching for her. The next morning arrives. The villagers once again continue digging and preparing the soil. Day after day, Shizuku pours all of her energy into the work. The meals remain plain and insufficient. There are still no proper baths. There is still no comfortable futon waiting for her at night. And without the assistance of the village's able-bodied men, every task becomes significantly more difficult. She gradually realizes that completing her assignment may be impossible if things continue this way. Nevertheless, the routine persists. For several days, the villagers continue their efforts, preparing the land and caring for the newly planted crops. One day, while Shizuku is once again hard at work, a young woman approaches her with concern. The woman asks whether Shizuku is truly all right and gently reminds her not to push herself too hard. However, as she speaks, her attention suddenly shifts toward the tubs containing the unfamiliar plants. Her eyes widen in shock. The plants have already grown considerably. The speed of their growth is unlike anything she has ever witnessed before. Nearby, a man notices the commotion and approaches to investigate. Upon seeing the thriving plants, he is equally astonished. Unable to contain his curiosity, he steps closer and asks what exactly those strange plants are. The women soon report that everything has happened exactly as Shizuku predicted. The crops are growing at an astonishing rate, far faster than anyone expected. They begin to wonder if perhaps the village chief's words had been right all along, and whether they should finally start listening to her. However, the stubborn man refuses to admit it. Maintaining his pride, he insists that everyone else is mistaken. He gathers the other men and points out that they are cultivating crops unlike anything they have ever seen before. Not only that, but these strange plants seem to grow at an unbelievable speed. He also notes that the girl somehow managed to identify the fields that would produce poor harvests with remarkable accuracy. The more he thinks about it, the more it feels as though she possesses knowledge far beyond what anyone in the village should have. The men begin speculating about the technology and methods she comes from. Even then, one of the men stubbornly repeats that he never wanted a woman serving as village chief in the first place. Meanwhile, Shizuku focuses entirely on her work. Gathering the village women, she explains that they must increase the number of seedlings from that point onward. She carefully teaches them the process. First, the seedlings should be divided along the sides. After that, the separated pieces should be left in the sun for roughly a quarter of a day so that they dry out slightly. Once they begin to shrivel, they will start growing horizontally. Soon afterward, roots will emerge. By repeating this method, a single seedling can become 3 separate plants, and the process can continue until they have as many seedlings as they need. The women listen in amazement. One of them remarks that even if it is some advanced technology, the method still sounds impossible. Nearby, the skeptical man overhears the discussion and smirks to himself, convinced that the entire thing is nonsense. Shizuku remains calm. She tells everyone that it is perfectly fine if they believe she is lying or trying to deceive them. All she asks is that they try the method for themselves and judge the results afterward. As the gathering comes to an end, one of the women asks where she is going. Shizuku explains that she will return shortly because there is something she wishes to look for. Leaving the village, she reflects on her situation. She is not a person who belongs to this era. Ever since arriving in this strange world, she has secretly hoped that she might somehow return to the place where she first awakened. Yet every attempt proves futile. She cannot even find her sister's book, the one clue that might help her understand what happened. As she looks around, she notices once again how thin and malnourished everyone in the village is. The thought crosses her mind that if she were to disappear now, the village would likely collapse. She worries about what would become of the villagers. At the same time, she doubts that the local lord is the kind of person who would show consideration for their circumstances. After much thought, she finally reaches a conclusion. There is simply no other choice. She must stay and continue helping them. Back in the village, excitement begins spreading among the women. The method Shizuku taught them works exactly as promised. The seedlings truly multiply. Even the men are left speechless. In such a short amount of time, a handful of seedlings has become many. The crop in question is the sweet potato. Historically, sweet potatoes were introduced to Japan near the end of the 16th century. Because of their nutritional value and their ability to thrive even in poor, infertile soil, they have repeatedly played a vital role during times of famine. Furthermore, the selectively bred varieties and refined cultivation techniques that Shizuku brings with her continue to transform the region. Although Shizuku has gradually adjusted to the modest meals and the uncomfortable beds, there remains one hardship she finds particularly difficult to endure. The lack of a proper bath is simply too much. While attempting to clean herself in private, she suddenly hears voices approaching. Startled, she quickly hides herself and wonders what the men are doing there. The men explain that they have been discussing recent events. At first, they had no idea how everything would turn out, but now they believe that this mysterious technology of hers may actually be worth trusting. They make it clear that she should not misunderstand their intentions. They are willing to listen to her regarding agricultural technology and cultivation methods. However, that does not mean they recognize her as the village chief. Shizuku readily accepts their position. She considers such a reaction perfectly normal. Then, to her surprise, the men awkwardly admit something else. Looking at her now, they realize that she truly has nothing to hide. For a long time, they had genuinely thought she was a woman. Hearing this, Shizuku cannot help but think that perhaps there is finally a light at the end of the tunnel. It is the 5th month of the year, 1565. 2 months have passed since Shizuku first arrived in the village. With the men's cooperation finally secured, and the work on improving the soil progressing steadily, the development of the farmland continues without delay. The seeds she brought from the future have adapted surprisingly well and are growing at a healthy pace. After completing the planting, Shizuku discovers that being allowed to use the fields freely is both a blessing and a burden. Before long, the villagers begin seeking her out for all sorts of tasks. One man approaches and asks her to help draw water. Another arrives carrying a broken item and requests that she repair it. Soon afterward, an elderly villager comes looking for her, and before she knows it, she finds herself massaging his aching shoulders. As she looks around at her daily routine, she cannot help but wonder if this really is the Sengoku era. Somehow, despite all the hardships, life has become relatively manageable. Still, she knows better than to lower her guard. The 5th month of 1565 corresponds to the Roku era. She recalls something her grandfather often told her back in the future. Agriculture is a battle against Mother Nature. Now she understands exactly what he meant. The crops may be growing well, but new challenges are already approaching. Before long, pests will begin appearing and threaten everything they have worked so hard to cultivate. As if on cue, her attention is suddenly drawn toward movement near the fields. A deer emerges from the surrounding area. The sight immediately puts her on alert. Japanese deer are known for having widespread populations, even beyond the borders of Japan. Among the countless agricultural pests that have troubled farmers throughout history, deer are among the most destructive. They reproduce quickly, travel in herds, and remain active from dawn until dusk. Given the opportunity, they can devastate entire fields in a remarkably short amount of time. As soon as she identifies the threat, the animal begins feeding on the crops. The cute-looking creature proves to be nothing less than a disaster for the village's food supply. Damaged plants soon become visible throughout the field. Shizuku wonders just how many deer there are in the area. When she asks, one of the men explains that nobody knows the exact number. However, he estimates that there are probably around 100 or even 200 of them. During the past 2 or 3 years, their population has suddenly exploded. According to the villagers, there used to be hunters living in the mountains who helped keep the deer population under control. However, at some point, all of those hunters disappeared. In the village itself, there had once been a man skilled with a bow, but he passed away from old age the previous year. The villagers look towards Shizuku and ask whether she can use the mysterious power of NA and BA to solve the problem. Some suggest asking the local lord for assistance. While that might provide a solution, Shizuku hesitates. She worries that the lord may simply view the villagers as incompetent and useless if they immediately seek outside help. For now, she decides they should only turn to him if every other option fails. If she had access to electric fencing or even the internet, solving the problem would be simple. Unfortunately, this is the Sengoku era. Accepting reality, Shizuku gathers everyone together and declares that they will have to settle for building protective fences around the fields. The entire village immediately gets to work. Men, women, and children alike contribute to the effort. Even those already occupied with their daily responsibilities help construct the barriers. As night falls, fires are lit around the farmland, and the villagers take turns standing watch to prevent the deer from entering. However, Shizuku has no intention of remaining purely defensive. She wants to take the offensive as well. To accomplish this, she visits Kinzo, the village's only blacksmith. After explaining her idea, she asks whether he thinks it can be made. Kinzo studies her proposal carefully before replying that he will give it a try. His answer gives her hope. Even if they do not possess some miraculous secret weapon, they certainly are not going into battle unprepared. Later, Shizuku and one of the villagers quietly observe the fields from a hidden position. Before long, they spot the deer once again. This time, however, Shizuku sees more than just a threat. She sees an opportunity. If they can successfully hunt the animals, the village will gain access to a valuable source of meat. Deer meat could significantly improve the villagers' diet and help alleviate their food shortages. Using materials already available to them, she modifies a simple straw sandal into a primitive sling. A stone can be securely held within it and launched with considerable force. The sling is a simple but effective tool designed for flinging stones. Throughout human history, similar weapons have been used in countless regions around the world. Several of these weapons are made from various materials, with their construction differing from region to region. Shizuku has always been thoroughly beaten by her older sister whenever she becomes eager to engage in mock battles, but she now realizes that those experiences have turned out to be surprisingly useful. She throws a stone toward a deer, yet the animal immediately runs away. This leaves her wondering how it notices the danger even before the stone reaches it. However, to her surprise, she soon discovers the reason. A wolf is lurking behind the deer. The sight makes her tremble with fear, but the wolf merely glances in her direction before turning around and leaving. Its presence does not make much sense. Wolves are not supposed to be living in this area. Since the local deer population is flourishing, it most likely wanders in from somewhere else. If wolves were to settle in the region permanently, the damage caused by the overabundance of deer would decrease significantly. For the moment, however, the situation is somewhat problematic. Several days later, the villagers continue their hunting efforts. Previously, they have relied primarily on sound to detect approaching prey. But this time, they decide to take advantage of the wider range provided by their long, sturdy hunting tools. Even so, their attempt once again ends in failure. Internally, Shizuku almost finds herself pleading with the deer to run in a particular direction. To her astonishment, the animal does exactly that. Only then does she notice that the hunters have prepared a trap in advance. The device is positioned directly in the deer's path. It is a leg-hold trap, a hunting tool that has been used since ancient times. When prey steps onto the center of the mechanism, the hook is released. The spring mechanism immediately activates, causing the metal jaws to snap shut around the animal's leg with tremendous force. In modern-day Japan, laws have made such traps unavailable to the general public. The impact alone is often powerful enough to cause an animal to lose consciousness. Therefore, it is essential to begin the bloodletting process at precisely the right moment. One of the men wonders whether they truly intend to eat the animal, but Shizuku remains convinced that they must do so. She believes that improving everyone's physical condition is necessary for survival. Throughout Japan's history, people accustomed to meat-based diets have existed for centuries. However, in the year 675, laws prohibiting the consumption of certain livestock are introduced. Despite such restrictions, Shizuku understands the importance of proper nutrition. If people possess stronger immune systems and greater stamina, diseases will spread less easily, and mortality rates will decline. As she watches the captured deer, memories from her previous life surface in her mind. She recalls a birthday from long ago when her grandfather presents her with a special gift. Those around them are unable to understand why he would give such an unusual gift to a young girl. Yet her grandfather insists that Shizuku is different. On that day, he teaches her a lesson she never forgets. To eat is to accept another living creature's sacrifice. Where there is life, there must inevitably be death. Feeling sadness or pity for the animal is natural, but condemning those who live by hunting and survival is foolish. Her grandfather then teaches her how to properly prepare various kinds of animals. The first step, he explains, is bleeding them. Remembering those lessons, Shizuku acts without hesitation. As soon as she cuts the deer's carotid artery, its blood pressure begins to drop immediately. Consciousness rapidly fades. If a small amount of life still remains within the animal, its heart continues to beat for a short time, forcing blood out through the arteries and even the smallest capillaries, allowing the body to expel as much blood as possible. After making the initial cut and removing the internal organs, the carcass is placed in a cold river for further processing. The flowing water helps wash away the remaining blood while keeping the meat at a low temperature. After approximately 2 to 3 hours, the carcass is removed from the river, and the skin is carefully stripped away piece by piece. Most of the removed organs are found to be infested with parasites. Rather than wasting them, Shizuku decides that they can be fermented and mixed into the village's compost. Only the liver appears free from any visible parasites. Even the bile contained within it is usable. Since liver spoils quickly, it is cooked immediately. Shizuku encourages one of the men to try it. The moment he takes a bite, his eyes widen in surprise. The rich flavor leaves a strong impression on him, and before long he is eagerly hoping for another piece. The remaining portions of the deer are divided among the villagers. Much of the meat is preserved with salt for future consumption. Just as the work is nearing completion, Shizuku notices something unexpected. The wolf has returned. A sense of alarm immediately runs through her. This time, she is certain that the smell of blood has drawn it back. However, before she can react, the wolf suddenly collapses. As she approaches cautiously, she realizes how thin and emaciated the animal has become. It is little more than skin and bones. Looking at the unconscious creature, she wonders where the rest of its pack has gone. Perhaps it has become separated from them and wandered alone until starvation nearly claims its life. Without thinking too deeply about it, she gives the wolf a portion of meat. She even brings water and places it nearby. Only afterward does she question her own actions. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. Moments ago, she is butchering one animal for food, and now she is trying to save another. The hypocrisy of it all makes her shake her head in disbelief. Determined not to get involved any further, she turns around and begins to walk away. Yet after only a few steps, she stops. No matter how much she argues with herself, she simply cannot abandon the creature in its current state. When she eventually returns to the village with the wolf, the reaction is immediate. The villagers stare in shock and disbelief. Shizuku calmly reassures them that there is no need to panic. The animal is weak and surprisingly docile. She settles it in a safe location and continues feeding it, encouraging it to regain its strength. As she gently pets the recovering wolf, another piece of good news arrives. The villagers announce that the fence surrounding the settlement has finally been completed. At long last, they are free from the sleepless nights spent worrying about deer invading their fields. One of their greatest concerns has finally been resolved. While inspecting the newly finished defenses, one of the men points toward an unfamiliar structure and asks what it is. The device is a Texas gate, a barrier that Shizuku has previously explained to them. She's confident that they will eventually understand its usefulness. At the same time, she notices another accomplishment. Kinzo has successfully completed the weapon she designs for him, a crossbow. The crossbow is a weapon that is developed and used primarily throughout the Western world. Historical references to such weapons in Japan are extremely limited. Compared to a sling, it possesses far greater accuracy and lethality, making it an exceptionally effective hunting and defensive tool. Unlike a traditional bow, it requires significantly less training to use effectively. At the same time, it is safer and simpler to handle than a firearm, while remaining relatively easy to manufacture with the materials available to them. Shizuku cannot help but feel impressed. Despite having nothing more than her crude blueprint and a rough verbal explanation to work from, Kinzo manages to recreate the design remarkably well. Filled with admiration, she gives him an enthusiastic thumbs up. As for the Texas Gate, its primary purpose is to prevent livestock from escaping enclosed areas. The gaps in structure discourage animals from crossing, effectively containing them without the need for a constantly monitored barrier. However, ungulates occasionally become trapped within the gate's framework, leaving them unable to move until they are freed. It is the 7th month of 1565, and Shizuku feels that the heat is unbearable. Any hope she has for free time proves to be nothing more than wishful thinking, as work continues to pile up without end. She spends her days carrying out countless tasks, such as desilking corn, artificially staking tomatoes, pollinating pumpkins, and tending to many other agricultural responsibilities. Even though the weather remains favorable and everything progresses relatively smoothly, the workload never seems to lessen. At one point, she imagines herself relaxing in a bath. In her mind, it is the finest bath imaginable. To her, hot springs are the source of life itself, capable of freeing a person from every burden and worry. The thought fills her with a sense of purity and comfort. However, the reality is quite different. What appears to be a peaceful bath is merely a daydream. In truth, she is only wiping her body clean. Afterward, she goes to warm some water so that she can finally take a proper bath. As she does so, she cannot help thinking that it requires far too much time and effort merely to obtain a tub of lukewarm water. The inconvenience frustrates her enough that she approaches Kinzo and urges him to create something that could solve the problem. Kinzo, however, considers the idea impossible. From his perspective, they lack both the necessary iron and the proper techniques required to build such a device. His assessment leaves little room for optimism. Shizuku eventually returns to hunting, though her mind continues to drift back to the same subject. She knows that dwelling on it is pointless, yet that very realization only makes her desire it more strongly. Her concentration wanders constantly, making it difficult for her to focus on the task before her. As she walks through the area, she notices several soap berries. The berries immediately catch her attention because their interiors contain high concentrations of saponin, making them natural surfactants. Thanks to this property, they can serve as a substitute for soap. Rather than satisfying her, the discovery only intensifies her longing for a proper bath. She finds herself wondering whether it is wrong to want such a thing so badly. While examining the berries, she notices the wolf accompanying her, sniffing around the area. Looking at him more carefully, she realizes that he had been so scrawny when she first encountered him that she had not paid much attention to his appearance. Now, however, it is clear that he is a gray wolf. That realization surprises her, since gray wolves are not a breed commonly found in Japan. The discrepancy makes her wonder why such an animal is present here at all. Perhaps someone brought him as a gift, and he eventually escaped. The possibility lingers in her mind. The wolf continues investigating something nearby, drawing her attention toward a particular direction. His behavior suggests that he has found something significant. When Shizuku follows his gaze and looks toward the source of his interest, her eyes widen in astonishment. The scene then shifts to the village. Shizuku gathers everyone together and announces a meeting. In her view, construction has become the highest priority. The project she intends to propose is revolutionary. It will help people remain clean, prevent disease, relieve fatigue, and improve overall health. To her, it seems absolutely perfect. The idea fills her with such confidence that she feels as though nothing can frighten her anymore. With an accomplishment like this, even Oda-sama would have no choice but to reevaluate her contributions. Just as these thoughts pass through her mind, she becomes aware of a voice expressing approval and describing the idea as very promising. The speaker turns out to be the Lord himself. The sudden appearance of the Lord startles her. Realizing that her earlier tone may have been inappropriate, she becomes visibly flustered and immediately regrets her lack of formality. She feels compelled to apologize and seeks forgiveness for having spoken so boldly in his presence. The Lord, however, remains composed and tells her to raise her head. He explains that he has already received a report from Yoshinari. According to that report, Shizuku has been constructing something rather unusual, and he wishes to see it for himself. Not long afterward, they find themselves standing inside the newly built bathing facility. Shizuku begins explaining that the structure is actually an onsen. Through the use of a series of wooden cylinders, they have succeeded in drawing hot water from a source they recently discovered. As the water travels toward the bath, it passes through a simple filtration system designed to improve its quality. Before she can finish her explanation, the Lord decides that he has heard enough. His interest has already been captured, and he expresses a desire to try it immediately. Shizuku attempts to caution him. The system has only just begun operating, and no proper tests have yet been conducted. Nevertheless, the Lord remains unconcerned and insists that it does not matter. His reaction confirms something Shizuku has heard before. The rumors regarding his intense curiosity appear to be entirely true. During the Sengoku era, a bath in which people submerge themselves in hot water does not yet exist. Instead, what exists during this time are steam baths, or, in other words, saunas. Important figures such as Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin possess hot springs of their own. However, access to them is said to be restricted to only a select number of people. It is not until the Edo period that baths using hot water become widely popularized, particularly in Edo itself. Among the general populace, open-air bathing becomes the norm. Shizuku explains to the Lord that proper etiquette dictates cleansing the body before entering the bath. However, the Lord simply sits down and urges her to stop delaying and proceed with the washing. Left with little choice, she begins cleansing his body. As she does so, she cannot help but notice his physique. The way his body is built makes him appear as though he has been carved from solid stone. His muscles are extraordinarily well developed, a testament to years of warfare and training. The Lord inquires about the substance she is using. Shizuku explains that it consists of soap berries that have been ground into powder and mixed with water. The mixture removes oil from the skin and leaves the body feeling refreshed and clean. Even as she explains, she cannot help but marvel at the absurdity of her situation. She is currently washing the back of the so-called Demon King of the Sixth Heaven himself. Reality, she reflects, can often be stranger than fiction. The sheer absurdity of the circumstance begins to excite her. Afterward, the Lord lowers himself into the bath. The moment he settles into the hot water, he feels an overwhelming sense of comfort. To him, it is nothing short of paradise. Watching his reaction only makes Shizuku want to enter the bath herself. She can hardly contain her anticipation. The Lord then calls out to her and asks at what age she left Nanban society. Shizuku replies that it was quite recently. He presses further, asking where exactly this place is located. He notes that it cannot be very far away. Shizuku explains that she was brought here while unconscious. Because of that, she has no clear understanding of where it is situated relative to Hinamoto. The Lord tells her that if she ever remembers or realizes anything concerning its location, she is to report it immediately. His words cause Shizuku to reflect. It seems that he is considering the possibility of foreign trade. Given his ambitions, such thoughts are hardly surprising. The Lord then remarks that regardless of her origins, the thing she calls an onsen is truly magnificent. As a reward for her efforts, he grants her permission to use it herself. Shizuku begins to point out that he has shown similar generosity to men such as Takehide, Taru, Harunobu, and others. She has heard that after the completion of various halls and construction projects, he often allowed his retainers to use them freely. Before she can finish her explanation, however, the Lord rises from the bath and fixes her with a sharp stare. He remarks that even if she were a spy, she would have to be a remarkably foolish one. The sudden accusation causes Shizuku to panic, nearly on the verge of tears. She insists that she is not a spy. It was merely an accident. She had only happened to overhear someone mention those names, and she desperately asks him to believe her. The Lord remains unconvinced and demands that she speak about whatever knowledge she possesses regarding Takeda. Shizuku quickly realizes that if she keeps her explanation brief, she may be able to obscure the issue. Instead, she launches into an elaborate narration. She begins explaining how, over in Kofu, an embankment project had taken 19 years to complete. The construction altered the flow of the rivers and allowed... Before she can continue any further, the Lord abruptly cuts her off. He declares that he has heard enough. At that moment, Shizuku inwardly berates herself. She cannot help wondering what possessed her to start explaining such details. In her own mind, she is being an idiot and only making matters worse. The Lord states that he does not know whether she is a spy from Nanban or from somewhere else entirely. Regardless, he remarks that perhaps the simplest solution is to continue having her work on the farm. He steps out of the bath and makes his position unmistakably clear. Her talents are to be used solely for his benefit. The moment she leaves his service will be the moment she dies. He instructs her never to forget that fact. Despite the severity of his words, Shizuku cannot help but view the situation from another perspective. Most warlords would never have extended patronage to a woman of unknown lineage and uncertain origins. Perhaps that reality makes the harsh treatment easier to endure. Even if he is a difficult lord to serve, she may ultimately have been fortunate. The lord then remarks that the harvest season appears to be drawing near, and admits that he is looking forward to seeing the results. Shizuku responds with enthusiasm. Of course she is as well. The scene then shifts to Shizuku finally enjoying the bath for herself. As she relaxes in the warm water, she once again feels as though she has entered paradise. The exhaustion of her labor begins to melt away. She reflects happily that tomorrow, she will be able to devote herself to the harvest once more. Filled with renewed determination, she loudly declares that the Lord only needs to wait and see. She will surely accomplish her mission. It has been 4 months since Shizuku arrives at the village. Although various issues, both large and small, continue to persist, she manages to survive by working together with the villagers. Amid these ever-changing circumstances, the seeds of the future have finally ripened. What were once mere possibilities have now transformed into a bountiful harvest. The journey has been difficult and filled with challenges, but she is genuinely happy with the results. Deep down, she feels an overwhelming sense of satisfaction and gratitude for how far they have come. Now only one final task remains. As she looks at the cart carrying the products of their labor, she wonders whether the Lord will be pleased with what she has accomplished. Accompanied by Togogo, Saku-san, and Nisaku-san, she makes her way toward the meeting place. Along the way, another concern weighs on her mind. She wonders whether the Lord will understand the reason rice is absent from this harvest, despite its importance during this era. Rice is an exceptionally precious resource. It is distributed not only to retainers but also to common soldiers. The quantity of rice that a feudal lord is capable of securing is a matter of great significance and often determines the strength and stability of a domain. Its value is immense, and the burden associated with obtaining sufficient supplies is said to stem from the many battles fought during the winter months, as well as the fact that farmers generally conclude their work by that time of year. Today marks the day when Shizuku presents the fruits of her labor before the Lord. Upon her arrival, the Lord instructs her to raise her head and demonstrate what she has accomplished. The moment causes her heart to race once again, and nervousness fills her stomach with butterflies. Nevertheless, she gathers her courage and proceeds with the presentation. With the Lord's permission, she reveals the harvest. The sight immediately shocks everyone gathered there. None of those present have ever seen crops such as these before. They stare in astonishment, unable to hide their bewilderment as they wonder what exactly they are looking at. The appearance of the produce is so unusual that many regard it as something strange and unprecedented. After presenting the harvest itself, Shizuku explains that dishes prepared from these crops have also been brought for the occasion. She respectfully requests that the Lord sample them. Although it is commonly understood that the Lord is generally indifferent toward food, she still hopes that he will appreciate what has been prepared. The meal consists of pumpkin and deer meat cooked in miso, boiled corn, sweet potatoes, miso-flavored onigiri, and salted tomatoes. The Lord examines each dish carefully and finds the assortment intriguing. While another individual attempts to reserve the role of food taster, the Lord dismisses the necessity of such precautions and begins eating the food himself. As he continues tasting the dishes, beads of sweat begin appearing on his face. The unexpected reaction immediately causes concern among those present. Panic spreads through the gathering, and many begin shouting toward Shizuku, fearing that she may have poisoned the food. Their accusations startle her, but before the situation can escalate further, the Lord orders everyone to remain silent. Ignoring the commotion around him, the Lord focuses entirely on the food before him. The pumpkin, in particular, leaves a profound impression. He realizes that he has never before experienced such a texture. Beneath its subtle sweetness lies a uniquely chewy sensation, unlike anything he can properly describe. The combination of ingredients and the skillful methods used in preparing them strike him as truly remarkable. He recognizes both the quality of the produce itself and the artistry involved in transforming it into such dishes. Shizuku feels relieved and grateful upon hearing this assessment. However, the Lord's evaluation is not yet complete. After praising the food, he turns his attention toward a matter he considers far more important. Despite everything he has seen and tasted, one question remains unanswered in his mind: the absence of rice. The inquiry immediately causes Shizuku to become slightly uneasy. Nevertheless, the Lord indicates that he is certain she must have had a reason for making such a decision. Encouraged by this opportunity to explain herself, she presents the rationale behind her actions. She explains that the likelihood of successfully completing the task he assigned had greatly increased because of the particular seeds and crops they obtained. However, after carefully considering the number of villages involved and the resources available to them, she concluded that attempting to cultivate rice alongside these other crops would create significant problems. The limitations of labor, land, and management would make such an undertaking impractical and potentially harmful to the overall success of the project. At the same time, she emphasizes that she is fully aware of the immense importance of rice within society. She does not take the matter lightly. Nevertheless, she firmly believes that the crops being presented today possess a value comparable to rice itself. In fact, she is confident enough to declare that, under the current circumstances, they may prove even more valuable than rice. Her bold assertion immediately provokes disbelief among those in attendance. Many find the statement absurd and struggle to accept such a claim. To them, comparing these unfamiliar crops to rice is already difficult enough. Suggesting that they might surpass rice in value seems utterly ridiculous. Despite the skeptical reactions surrounding her, Shizuku remains composed. She continues addressing the Lord with confidence and respect. Finally, she explains that, if he permits her to do so, she would like to present a concept known as Fukoku Kyohei. Shizuku explains that Fukoku Kyohei is a policy aimed at restoring the economy while simultaneously reinforcing military power. The phrase literally means rich country, strong army, representing a governmental policy and philosophy centered on developing national industry and economic strength while building a powerful military force. It is said that the origins of this concept can be traced back to the Eastern Zhou period of China's Zhou dynasty. In Japan, the policy would later become associated with efforts during the closing years of the Edo period, when the nation faced increasing pressure from Western powers. At that time, both those who advocated opening the country and those who sought to expel foreign influence found common ground in supporting measures designed to strengthen the nation. Shizuku continues her explanation by stating that, in order to strengthen a country, it is first necessary to establish a stable foundation capable of supporting the lives of ordinary people. Without a secure and reliable infrastructure, true national prosperity cannot be achieved. To accomplish this, she believes that the current flow of supplies throughout the region is insufficient and requires significant improvement. The crops being presented today, she explains, offer a solution to many of these problems. They possess strong resistance against pests and diseases, making them considerably more reliable than many traditional crops. Among them, sweet potatoes are particularly noteworthy due to their ability to grow even in infertile soil. This characteristic makes them extraordinarily valuable during times when rice cultivation becomes difficult or impossible. Furthermore, these crops possess substantial nutritional value. As nutrition improves, the mortality rate among children suffering from malnutrition will decline significantly. As a result, the population will steadily increase, leading to growth in both the available labor force and the number of potential soldiers. Shizuku reminds those present that infant and child mortality rates during this era are reported to be as high as 50%. Because of this harsh reality, even a modest improvement in nutrition would create an enormous impact upon society as a whole. By utilizing these agricultural methods, communities can simultaneously increase crop yields and improve overall health. Through these improvements, the nation can become wealthy through increased production and a growing population. A larger and healthier population will naturally provide more laborers, artisans, and soldiers. In this way, the country can achieve the ideal of becoming both a rich nation and a strong military power. She further points out that within the present-day lands of Hinamoto, there is not a single state currently implementing such a strategy. Because of this, she firmly believes that adopting these measures would provide the shortest and most effective path toward the eventual unification of the country. Her words leave the Lord visibly shocked. As he listens to her reasoning, he finds himself astonished that someone could think so deeply and comprehensively about farming. What began as a simple agricultural assignment has evolved into a far-reaching vision for national prosperity and military strength. The Lord acknowledges that Shizuku has truly demonstrated her capabilities. He praises her achievements and declares her proposal magnificent. In his eyes, she has successfully fulfilled the task entrusted to her. Shizuku expresses her gratitude for his praise. However, the Lord is not finished. He immediately calls out to Saru and orders him to gather a group of 50 farmers. Upon hearing this, Shizuku's attention shifts toward the man being addressed. She recognizes him as the individual who would later become Toyotomi Hideyoshi. She wonders whether this is the period when he is still known as Kinoshita Tokichiro. The Lord continues to refer to him by the nickname Saru, meaning quote, quote. Yet Shizuku cannot help noticing that his face does not resemble a monkey at all. The Lord then turns his attention back to Shizuku and announces that he will grant her new territory. Within that land, she is to establish a large operational base. Rather than feeling only joy, Shizuku is stunned and somewhat concerned. She cannot believe that she is already being entrusted with additional territory. The responsibility feels immense, and the pace of events leaves her struggling to keep up. Later, while outside, the Lord asks her what she thinks of the current state of the country. Shizuku answers honestly. She believes that if the conflicts between the various states continue, everything will eventually be reduced to ruin. Endless warfare will consume resources, devastate farmland, and bring suffering to countless people. The Lord agrees with her assessment. He states that they must act quickly to rebuild the country once more. If the nation can be united, it will become capable of surpassing powerful foreign nations such as the Ming and the Nanban. Through unity and prosperity, they will create a flourishing country unlike any seen before. As she listens, Shizuku cannot help recalling the future she knows. She knows that the Lord standing before her will never achieve the complete unification of the country himself. She knows that betrayal awaits him. She knows that his life will ultimately come to an end while he is still pursuing his dream. Because of that knowledge, she quietly resolves to engrave this moment into her heart. She does not want to remember only the historical figure recorded in textbooks and chronicles. Instead, she wants to remember the man standing before her now, the man who dreams of rebuilding the country and bringing peace to the land. Before they part ways, the Lord informs her that he will send a reward in recognition of her recent accomplishments. He then asks her to state her wish. In response, Shizuku merely smiles. The scene then shifts forward to the 10th month of the year 1565. A celebration is underway. Freshly roasted sweet potatoes are prepared, and Shizuku encourages everyone to take at least one. She praises the villagers for all of their hard work and tells them that they have done an excellent job. Today is a day for celebration. They are free to eat, drink, and enjoy themselves to their heart's content. The atmosphere immediately becomes lively and cheerful. Everyone is overflowing with happiness as they gather together to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Earlier, when the Lord asked her to state her wish, Shizuku had already given her answer. She explained that she did not need anything more. The new land he had granted her was already a wonderful reward in itself. When she first arrived in this era, she had no idea what she was supposed to do. She had been lost, confused, and uncertain about her future. It is not that she no longer wishes to return to the present. Rather, she now possesses something precious in this world. Before her stretches a vast field of possibilities, a place where she can freely cultivate the land and pursue her dreams. That thought fills her with genuine happiness. At the time, she had told the Lord that she was looking forward to the opportunity. She confidently promised that next year they would present him with so much rice that his jaw would drop in astonishment. The bold declaration had amused the Lord and left him impressed by her confidence. Now, as she watches the celebration unfold around her, Shizuku reflects upon the future. Someday, she will return to her own time. She knows that day will eventually come. But until then, she intends to devote herself completely to this era. Approximately 1 year has passed since Shizuku arrived in the Sengoku era. During that time, she has steadily established herself within her new surroundings. Along with receiving an additional plot of land, new workers are assigned to assist her with the growing responsibilities of her village. Furthermore, as part of the rewards granted to her for her accomplishments, she is given a large estate. Along with the estate, a young woman named Aya is placed under her service. Upon learning of this arrangement, Shizuku seeks confirmation regarding Aya's role. It is explained to her that Aya is indeed a handmaiden assigned to serve her. Aya formally presents herself and expresses her readiness to assist with anything Shizuku may require. In return, Shizuku courteously acknowledges her and expresses her pleasure at making her acquaintance. Aya is visibly surprised by the warmth of Shizuku's response. As a handmaiden, she is unaccustomed to receiving gratitude or consideration from those she serves. Her reaction prompts an observation from the Lord, who remarks that such behavior is characteristic of Shizuku. Realizing that her actions have drawn attention, Shizuku feels somewhat apologetic. Women who remain close to individuals of high status while performing various duties on their behalf are known as handmaidens. Their responsibilities often involve attending to the daily needs of their masters and mistresses. Male servants, meanwhile, are commonly referred to as pages. Pages are expected to possess not only good manners and proper education, but also unwavering loyalty. They are trained to place their master's well-being above their own. During times of war, pages frequently accompany their masters onto the battlefield and serve as personal bodyguards, willingly risking their lives if necessary. The Lord subsequently informs Aya that, for the day, her service is to be devoted entirely to Shizuku. Aya accepts this responsibility with complete sincerity and determination. She expresses her intention to prove herself worthy of serving as Shizuku's handmaiden, declaring that she will dedicate herself wholeheartedly to fulfilling that role, even at the cost of her own life if required. Hearing such a solemn declaration leaves Shizuku deeply impressed. To her modern sensibilities, the unwavering dedication and formality of Aya's pledge seem remarkably cool. Afterward, a man presents Shizuku with a letter that has arrived from the Lord. As she examines the document, her attention is immediately drawn to the distinctive signature at the bottom. She recognizes it as a Kilin signature, known as a cow, a stylized personal mark commonly used during the era. In many instances, such signatures do not necessarily contain a person's actual name. Unlike the official black and red seals employed on formal documents, cow are generally reserved for personal correspondence and communications directed toward individuals of lower rank. Shizuku recalls that literacy is not widespread during this period, and many important figures rely heavily upon professional scribes to compose and record documents. If her memory serves correctly, the Lord himself employs approximately 3 dedicated scribes for such work. Turning her attention to the contents of the letter, she carefully reads its message. The order contained within is straightforward yet daunting. Shizuku's village is required to deliver 25 bales of rice. The announcement immediately shocks Edibon and the others. To them, the demand seems utterly impossible. Although the village has gained additional workers and expanded farmland, even achieving half of the requested amount would be extraordinarily difficult, even under favorable harvest conditions. Shizuku, however, is not entirely surprised. Inwardly, she reflects that such an unreasonable request is exactly what she has come to expect from the Lord. There is no denying that fulfilling the order will be an enormous challenge. Ordinarily, the story would proceed according to the agricultural methods available during the Sengoku era, and success would seem unlikely. However, Shizuku possesses knowledge that far surpasses the farming techniques of the time. To the surprise and relief of those around her, she begins to smile. The sight immediately reassures Edibon and the others. They recognize that Shizuku only wears such an expression when she has already conceived a solution. She promptly decides that the village will employ the seed flotation method to sort its unhusked rice seeds. The process involves placing the seeds into a saltwater solution prepared at a ratio of 1 part salt to 16 parts water. Within the mixture, inferior seeds float to the surface, while the desirable seeds, being heavier and healthier, sink to the bottom. This method allows farmers to select seeds with larger quantities of endosperm, ensuring that the chosen grains possess greater vitality. As a result, the seeds are more likely to germinate successfully, establish strong roots, and develop into productive rice plants. Shizuku knows that this technique will dramatically improve the quality of the crops planted by the village. Historically, when the seed flotation method was introduced during the Meiji era, it was reportedly capable of increasing harvest yields by more than 10%. The selected seeds are then left to absorb water for approximately 10 minutes. Great care is taken during this process, as excessively warm temperatures can cause the seeds to burst prematurely. To prevent this from happening, the soaking is conducted in a shaded area where the temperature remains stable. Some of the villagers question the necessity of such a troublesome procedure. From their perspective, it would seem far more efficient to plant the seeds immediately, rather than spend time sorting and soaking them. Arabelle quickly notices that these questions are coming primarily from the newer workers who are unfamiliar with Shizuku's methods and innovations. Before Arabelle can respond further, one of the men reminds everyone to remain calm and simply follow the village chief's instructions. He points out that everything has always worked out whenever they have trusted her judgment. After all, it is only because of Shizuku's efforts that they have managed to avoid punishment and survive difficulties that would otherwise have overwhelmed them. His words immediately quiet Arabelle. Shizuku then explains that while the seeds are being prepared, there is no reason to waste time. Instead, everyone should focus on preparing the paddy fields. During the winter months, the villagers begin by plowing the fields and maintaining the footpaths that run between them. Afterward, the fields are lightly raked before water is introduced. Several days later, the preparation reaches its final stage, as the soil is carefully flattened and rice husks are scattered across the surface. Even though the village now possesses a larger workforce than before, the amount of cultivable land has increased by an even greater margin. As a result, the work remains physically demanding, and every available hand is required to complete the preparations. As the work progresses, one of the villagers suggests that they should begin sowing the rice soon. Shizuku immediately rejects the idea of rushing the process. According to her, cutting corners at this stage is absolutely unacceptable. The methods they are using represent cutting-edge agricultural technology by the standards of her knowledge, and every step serves an important purpose. Skipping even a single procedure could reduce the effectiveness of the entire cultivation plan. 1 month passes after the seeds have been selected and soaked. At last, the seedlings grow large enough to be transplanted into the paddies. Even then, Shizuku refuses to allow careless planting. Simply scattering the seedlings haphazardly throughout the field is completely out of the question. During the winter, she has spent time creating a special farming tool known as a rolling frame. Now she demonstrates its use to the villagers, showing them exactly how it should be rolled across the prepared field. The villagers watch with familiar expressions. Many of them cannot help thinking that their village chief has once again invented something strange. Ignoring their confusion, Shizuku explains that the purpose of the frame is to create evenly spaced crossing points. The rice seedlings must be planted precisely at these intersections. This technique is known as regular row planting. Historically, this innovative method was introduced during the Meiji era. Rather than planting seedlings randomly, each plant is placed at equal intervals from its neighbors. The benefits are numerous. Every plant receives greater exposure to sunlight. Air circulation between the rows improves significantly. Removing weeds becomes much easier, and harmful insects are easier to detect and eliminate. What eventually becomes the standard method of rice cultivation dramatically increases overall harvest yields. For a village facing an enormous rice quota, such improvements are invaluable. However, even after the rice has finally been transplanted, Shizuku cannot afford to relax. There are still countless problems that require her attention. One day, Shishi approaches Kenzu and asks about the progress of a task he has been assigned. Kenzo admits that the work is difficult. Rather than criticizing him, Shizuku offers encouragement. She reassures him that he is capable of completing it and urges him to finish as quickly as possible. Although rice production remains her primary concern, another issue weighs heavily on her mind. Thanks to Whitman, the number of vermin around the village has decreased significantly. Nevertheless, the villagers still require a reliable source of protein. Meat remains difficult to obtain consistently, and improving hunting efficiency would greatly benefit the entire settlement. If Whitman were present, hunting expeditions would proceed much more smoothly. Unfortunately, it is currently mating season. Shizuku suspects that Whitman may have wandered off in search of a mate. While thinking about this matter, she suddenly notices a deer nearby. At first, the sight seems promising. However, her attention is immediately drawn to something behind it. A wild boar emerges into view. The animal is clearly injured, but rather than retreating, it charges directly toward her. Shizuku instantly recognizes the danger. Knowing that a wounded boar can be even more dangerous than a healthy one, she reacts without hesitation. She rushes forward and strikes at the boar with her weapon. To her alarm, the attack produces virtually no effect. Just as the boar is about to attack her, the wolfman arrives in time and rescues her from the imminent danger. After being saved, she wonders whether the other wolf accompanying him is his wife. The scene then shifts to the village, where loud shouts erupt as the villagers notice that Shizuku has returned, accompanied by 2 wolves. The villagers express their surprise, remarking that they had only just begun getting accustomed to seeing 1 wolf around, and now there are suddenly 2 of them. Shizuku immediately directs everyone's attention to the work that lies ahead, announcing that they will begin the weeding process. The villagers react with dread, already imagining the inevitable pain in their backs from the labor-intensive task. However, Shizuku explains that because the rice has been planted using this particular method, the weeding process will be significantly easier than usual. She then reveals that there is something else she has prepared for them. The item she presents is the rotary weeding machine created by Kenzu. She explains that this invention originally appears during the Meiji era. The machine is capable of removing weeds while simultaneously strip drilling and stirring the soil. This remarkable tool dramatically improves work efficiency. Furthermore, by turning and aerating the soil, it helps eliminate toxic gases trapped within it, while allowing fresh oxygen to enter and circulate properly. As the villagers begin using the machine to remove the weeds, they quickly realize how effective it is and think that the invention is truly impressive. The villagers continue performing this intertillage weeding process twice every 10 days. Nevertheless, despite having access to such a useful tool, the work remains extremely demanding. In addition to weeding, they must also remove harmful insects and carefully monitor and adjust the water levels throughout the rice fields. Because of these responsibilities, there is never an opportunity for them to relax or let their guard down. Time steadily passes as June comes to an end. Soon afterward, July also passes, and before long, August is over as well. When the villagers finally observe the condition of the field, they are left completely astonished. One villager confidently declares that as long as they continue following the village chief's guidance, everything will surely turn out well. The others stare across the fields in amazement, admitting that they have never seen such an enormous amount of rice growing in a single field before. They openly praises Shizuku for her achievements, while Shizuku merely offers a simple expression of gratitude in response. Her calm and reserved reaction leads Aya to conclude that Shizuku is the cool and composed type of person. Through her actions, Shizuku continues to exceed everyone's expectations, constantly introducing ideas and methods that no one in the village has ever witnessed before. As she reflects upon everything that has been accomplished, she resolves to reveal the secret behind the hidden power of the Namban. Then she corrects that thought, realizing that it is not truly the power of the Namban at all, but rather the power and knowledge that belong to Shizuku herself. Having been entrusted with this responsibility and duty, she remains determined to see it through to the very end. Even if fulfilling that duty requires the ultimate sacrifice, she is prepared to carry it out, regardless of the cost to her own life. It is September 15th, 1566, and around this time, the Lord has already surrounded Mino and is engaged in a prolonged battle against Saito Tatsuoki. Meanwhile, back in Shizuku's village, everyone is occupied with the rice harvest. Shizuku has introduced a human-powered harvester to assist with the work. This revolutionary tool allows farmers to perform tasks that would normally require them to remain bent over for long periods, while instead working in an upright position. The machine is said to have originated from a winning entry in a public contest held during the Second World War, a competition that aims to address the severe shortage of labor. Over time, numerous improved versions are developed, including models capable of binding harvested rice together automatically. However, the version created by Kenzu is capable only of simple harvesting. Even so, it greatly increases work efficiency far beyond previous levels and significantly reduces the burden placed upon the villagers. As the harvest progresses, Yoshinori arrives and first expresses his admiration for everyone's hard work. He praises the villagers for successfully harvesting such a large quantity of rice. In response, Shizuku modestly attributes the achievement to the collective efforts of everyone involved. She feels that suggesting either she or Yoshinori has anything to do with the Lord's success would be giving themselves far too much credit. Yoshinori then brings up another matter. He mentions noticing a field filled with plants resembling bamboo and wonders what they might be. Shizuku explains that the plants are sugarcane. She quietly whispers this information to him, causing him considerable shock. After glancing around cautiously, she continues her explanation. When Yoshinori asks whether that strange plant can truly be turned into sugar, Shizuku confirms that it can. To demonstrate, she cuts a piece of sugarcane and offers it to him, encouraging him to take a bite. The moment he tastes it, he is astonished by its sweetness. Sugar originally comes to Japan from China during the Nara period and is first used primarily as medicine. Although it eventually finds its way into cooking, it remains an extremely valuable commodity because it is imported only in limited quantities and is not produced domestically. Realizing that Shizuku is capable of creating even something as precious as sugar leaves, Yoshinori convinced that she is truly an unfathomable person whose abilities seem to have no limit. Shizuku then asks Yoshinori whether there is a deeper reason for his visit. Yoshinori admits that there is indeed another matter he wishes to discuss. To be completely honest, his concern relates to domestic affairs. He explains that after conquering Mino, the Lord intends to strengthen the foundations of the country. Furthermore, the Lord wishes to borrow Shizuku's wisdom regarding matters of politics and finance. Yoshinori acknowledges that assigning a woman to oversee domestic affairs would be considered almost unheard of during this era. Yet he remarks that such an unconventional decision is entirely characteristic of their lord. He then makes it clear that this is not a request. The decision has already been made. Refusal is not considered an option. If she attempts to reject the appointment, she can expect severe consequences. Upon hearing this, Shizuku feels her stomach begin to ache from anxiety. After the harvesting process is completed, the rice undergoes bending and drying, followed by threshing, hulling, and milling. Once everything is finished, the rice is packed into bales. The final quantity easily surpasses the original target of 25 bales. Shizuku plans to present the harvest to the Lord personally. However, every visit to him makes her nervous. While she feels confident that exceeding the 25-bale goal should satisfy him, the issue of being placed in charge of domestic affairs continues to trouble her. She desperately wonders whether there might be some effective way to refuse the position. Eventually, the moment arrives when she finally meets the Lord. The instant he appears, he delivers a firm strike to her head and scolds her for being a complete fool. He points out that if she intended to bring such monstrous quantities of rice bales, she should have sent a message in advance to warn everyone. He starts pulling her along and gestures for her to come closer. The standard of 60-kilogram rice bales is established during the Meiji era, while the values used in earlier periods vary depending on the region and the time. In this particular era, a bale normally weighs only 30 kilograms. Although she receives 30-kilogram bales from the Lord as her stipend, she accidentally makes a mistake and packs the rice into the larger 60-kilogram bales that she has grown accustomed to handling while working with her grandfather. By this point, the villagers no longer question Shizuku's instructions. As she reflects on the situation, she realizes that they had probably wanted to say something about the matter, but had chosen not to challenge her orders. The Lord observes that the existing warehouses will not be sufficient to store everything. He turns his attention to the number of bales and begins considering how many additional warehouses will be required. Shizuku apologetically explains that she has actually brought 200 bales, and adds that some of them have already been transferred into storage. The Lord immediately focuses on the figures involved and asks how many standard bales can normally fit inside a single warehouse. The answer provided is 120. Realizing the importance of the calculation, Shizuku requests a brief moment to think. She quickly works through the numbers in her head. After finishing her calculations, she determines that they will require 3 additional warehouses to accommodate the harvest. The Lord considers her conclusion and accepts it. Satisfied with the assessment, he states that he will handle the remaining arrangements himself. Once Shizuku departs, the Lord discusses the matter with his subordinates. He remarks that her calculation had been performed almost automatically. The fact that she possesses such an ability strikes him as truly astonishing. During this era, arithmetic is a skill known to very few people outside of merchants and members of the upper class, such as feudal lords. More advanced forms of calculation are treated as highly confidential hereditary techniques that are passed down through select families. Because of this exclusivity, such methods are known as Vyas calculation. Curious about her background, the Lord asks one of his subordinates whether any new information regarding Shizuku has been uncovered. The subordinate reports that they have not found even the slightest trace of information concerning her origins. The Lord then shifts his inquiry toward the Ayanokuji clan. However, the subordinate explains that there is no record whatsoever of a girl named Shizuku ever being born into that family. Yoshinari reflects on the mystery surrounding her. He finds it difficult to believe that someone blessed with such remarkable talents could remain completely unknown. The lack of any records only strengthens his belief that she truly comes from Namban. The Lord agrees that her harvest alone is enough to inspire fear and amazement. He thinks about the sheer scale of what she has accomplished. 200 of those enormous bales are equivalent to roughly 400 normal bales, all produced from only 100 villagers. The achievement is extraordinary. Recognizing her capabilities, the Lord concludes that a time will eventually come when her talents must be utilized for matters beyond agriculture and household administration. Her abilities are simply too valuable to remain confined to those fields. One of the men expresses a note of caution. He points out that placing trust in someone who refuses to speak about their origins could potentially create serious problems in the future. Excessive trust, in his opinion, would be dangerous. Yoshinari acknowledges the concern, but offers his personal assessment. Based on his observations, he believes that Shizuku is far too honest to function as a spy. Her behavior consistently suggests sincerity rather than deception. The Lord agrees to a certain extent. In his view, Shizuku often appears absent-minded and dreamy, as though half of her thoughts are drifting among the clouds. Nevertheless, He admits that he would find it unbearable if she were ever manipulated by an actual spy and persuaded to defect. That concern is one of the primary reasons he promoted her. By elevating her position, he hopes to make her more aware of her responsibilities and of the importance of her standing within the domain. Even so, until her true origins are revealed, he believes they must continue handling her carefully. He notes that precautions have already been taken and that he has arranged a form of insurance should unforeseen circumstances arise. The scene then shifts to one of the villagers reporting to Shizuku that the assigned task has been completed perfectly. She is pleased by the successful result, yet her thoughts once again drift toward the responsibilities of domestic administration. She realizes that she may already have altered the course of agricultural history, at least to a small degree. However, she had only introduced those changes because she could not bear the thought of people starving to death. Domestic affairs, on the other hand, feel entirely different. She senses that involvement in that area will lead to consequences far beyond a simple improvement in farming techniques. The impact could spread much further than she intends. Although she understands that refusing such responsibilities is no longer an option, she still struggles with the idea of completely surrendering herself to this world and its expectations. At that moment, she notices the wolf approaching. The animal appears to be carrying something in its mouth. Looking more closely, she realizes that the object is her bag. Inside that bag is the book she brought with her from her modern life. The realization immediately captures her attention. She begins wondering whether some of her belongings might have been scattered or blown away without her noticing. Meanwhile, unseen by her, Aya quietly keeps watch from a distance, carefully observing Shizuku's actions and reactions. Shizuku steals her resolve in October of 1566. After making her decision, she requests Yoshinari to acquire a certain item for her. Aya is the one entrusted with delivering the message. When Yoshinari asks Aya what Shizuku intends to use the item for, Aya explains that Shizuku specifically instructed her not to reveal the reason. According to Shizuku, it would be troublesome if a spy were to catch wind of it, especially since it would take 2 to 3 years before any results became visible. Yoshinari states that he understands and assures her that the item will be delivered. Afterward, he asks whether she has managed to discover anything. Aya reports that she has found nothing in particular. Yoshinari tells her that he is counting on her, and Aya respectfully acknowledges his words. The scene then shifts as Aya returns and calls out for Shizuku. As she enters, she notices a box. It is the box containing important items, including her mistress Shizuku's bow. At the same time, she realizes that the wolves have also returned and are now sleeping peacefully inside the room. Shizuku soon appears and asks whether Aya has returned. Aya confirms that she has come back after delivering the request. Shizuku expresses her gratitude, saying that Aya has been a tremendous help. She then casually asks whether Aya would like a potato. Aya wonders if this is some sort of urgent order. Shizuku quickly clarifies that it is nothing of the sort and that she merely meant it as an offer. Hearing this, Aya replies that she will have one later. With that, Aya leaves the room. Watching her depart, Shizuku cannot help but wonder whether Aya dislikes her. The seeds that Shizuku brings with her into this era consist mostly of purebred plants. Many of these varieties are the result of her grandfather's selective breeding efforts. This year as well, Shizuku successfully guides numerous crops toward a plentiful harvest. In addition to farming, she begins several side projects. These include beekeeping, silkworm breeding, and poultry egg farming. On this particular day, the weather is exceptionally pleasant as she heads into the forest for another task. She asks Aya whether she is doing well. Aya politely tells her not to pay her any mind. Soon afterward, Aya asks about the purpose of their trip. Although they have come to gather mushrooms, she wonders exactly what Shizuku is searching for. Shizuku explains that she is looking for shimeji, nameko, and maitake mushrooms. She also mentions that she has successfully managed to cultivate shiitake mushrooms. The mention of shiitake mushrooms visibly startles Aya. Aya immediately asks whether such mushrooms can truly be cultivated. Shizuku replies that the process is actually quite simple, or perhaps not entirely simple, considering that she failed the previous year. She then points toward a location nearby and explains that the cultivation area is right over there. Upon seeing the large site, Aya is left astonished. She then asks Shizuku what she intends to do with so many mushrooms. Shizuku answers that they are, of course, meant to be eaten. She cannot imagine what else mushrooms would be used for. However, she adds that if Aya wishes to make soup stock, drying the mushrooms beforehand greatly enhances their flavor. Before methods for cultivating shiitake mushrooms became widely known during the 20th century, shiitake mushrooms were considered luxury items. They were an essential ingredient in Buddhist cuisine, yet they grew only in limited quantities in the wild. As a side note, during the Kamakura period, a monk named Dogen traveled to the southern Song dynasty in China. During his journey, it is said that a local monk requested dried shiitake mushrooms from him. After hearing all of this, Aya remarks that approximately 46 kilograms of shiitake mushrooms would be enough to purchase an entire castle. This revelation leaves Shizuku utterly stunned. Curious, she then asks about matsutake mushrooms. Aya responds by questioning whether shimeji mushrooms do not taste better. According to the records, there are scarcely any eccentrics who truly enjoy the flavor of matsutake mushrooms. Therefore, it turns out that matsutake mushrooms are considered significantly inferior to shiitake mushrooms. Shizuku does not expect such an assessment at all. Meanwhile, Aya finds herself wondering what kind of environment Shizuku was raised in. The more she learns about her mistress, the more mysterious she seems. Aya concludes that she will need to keep a close eye on her. After gathering a large quantity of mushrooms, Shizuku proudly remarks that they have achieved quite a harvest. Aya then asks where she learned such unusual cultivation techniques. Shizuku explains that she has a relative who is a mushroom scientist and that he taught her various bits of knowledge over the years. In addition, her grandfather has many experts among his acquaintances, and she learns numerous things from them as well. Thanks to that background, she is eventually able to enroll in a high school directly administered by the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. Aya struggles to make sense of these unfamiliar terms and explanations. At that moment, Shizuku warns Aya to watch her footing. Unfortunately, the warning comes too late. Aya has already fallen and scraped herself. Shizuku immediately calls out to her and asks whether she is all right. Aya quickly gets back to her feet and insists that she is fine. According to her, the mushrooms are far more important. However, just as she attempts to continue walking, her footing gives way once more. Before she can fall completely, Shizuku rushes forward and catches her. Aya immediately pulls away and insists once again that she is perfectly fine. Yet no sooner does she say that, than she stumbles and falls again. After examining the injury, Shizuku concludes that it appears to be only a shallow wound. She sets down the basket filled with mushrooms and announces that she will carry Aya. They need to return before the sun sets. Aya protests, saying that she could never impose upon her mistress in such a manner. In response, Shizuku firmly declares that it is an order. Aya stares at her in confusion. She cannot understand why Shizuku is always so kind to someone as insignificant as a maid. To Aya, Shizuku remains a mysterious person through and through. In the end, Aya finds herself being carried on Shizuku's back. Feeling guilty, she apologizes repeatedly. Shizuku, however, tells her that she actually finds it enjoyable. To her, it feels as though she has suddenly gained a little sister, so Aya has no reason to worry. Several days later, Shizuku returns home once again. Cheerfully, she announces that she has gathered a large number of persimmons that day. She then asks Aya whether she would like to eat some. Aya reminds herself that she must not allow her personal feelings to interfere with her mission. Nevertheless, she responds that if it is an order, she will comply. Hearing that answer, Shizuku remarks that Aya is still far too formal around her. December of 1566 arrives, and amid the increasingly bitter cold, the harvest of soybeans and sugarcane continues steadily. Shizuku remarks that the harvest has been good. She sets aside a portion as a gift for the Lord should he return, and plans to turn the remainder into miso and shoyu. Aya immediately wonders what shoyu is. In reality, shoyu is a type of miso-derived seasoning. The prototype of shoyu is hishio, which originates from the Jomon period. It remains in use until the end of the Muromachi period. Even when something similar to modern-day shoyu begins to appear, it does not spread among the general populace until the Edo period. For the time being, Shizuku decides to focus on the sugarcane harvest. Her next goal is the production of brown sugar. The sugarcane brought by Shizuku is based on the Chinese sugarcane variety, Saccharum sinense. Compared to ordinary sugarcane, it is less suitable for large-scale production but is capable of producing sugar of superior quality. The process begins by crushing the stalks and squeezing out the juice. The extracted liquid is then mixed with ashes produced by burning oyster shells. After allowing the impurities to settle, the clear liquid on the surface is carefully removed and boiled until the sugar begins to crystallize. One of the workers helping with the process comments on how incredibly sweet it is. Shizuku immediately cautions him not to drink too much of it. Since ancient times, sake and sweet foods have been treated as offerings to the gods. Ordinary people rarely have the opportunity to taste such luxuries. If her memory serves her correctly, sugar has also been used as a symbol of power. As mentioned earlier, sugar is not produced locally in Japan and is therefore extremely valuable. During the Muromachi period, 600 grams of sugar can be worth as much as 2,250 mon, which is equivalent to roughly 30,000 yen. Possessing a large quantity of sugar is not only a display of wealth, but also proof of strong overseas trade connections. As the boiling continues, the worker notices a sticky substance beginning to emerge from the mixture. Shizuku observes that it appears to be nearly finished. Once the water has completely evaporated, the concentrated mass only needs to solidify before the brown sugar is complete. Since brown sugar can also be used as medicine, Shizuku wants to reserve some for future use. When sugar is first introduced to Japan, it is primarily utilized as a medicinal substance. It is also employed in certain treatments, such as being applied directly to open wounds. Furthermore, several years ago, the results of 7 years of research conducted by an American doctor prove that sugar absorbs moisture around wounds, suppresses bacterial growth, and assists the healing process. While Shizuku is occupied with the finished product, Aya approaches and calls out to her. Shizuku immediately assumes that Aya is asking about something sweet and thinks that she can simply make some for her later. However, Aya quickly dismisses that assumption. She wonders since, when she has become such a glutton. Returning to the actual matter at hand, Aya explains that there is something she would like to borrow from Shizuku. The scene then shifts to Shizuku and Aya, who are now standing inside the Lord's residence. As she waits, Shizuku cannot help but wonder whether she has somehow made another mistake. She desperately hopes that she has not messed things up this time. Aya gently urges her to calm down, but Shizuku is still traumatized by the severe scolding she received previously. Before she can dwell on it any longer, she notices that the Lord is present. Immediately, she lowers her head in a respectful bow. The Lord instructs both of them to raise their heads. When he remarks that the offerings she has presented this time are exceptionally splendid, Shizuku quickly notices that he seems to be in an unusually good mood. The Lord continues by explaining that the shiitake mushrooms and sugar will greatly enrich his war chest, while the soybeans will provide valuable feed for his war horses. With these resources, he can significantly strengthen his army, and that newfound strength will hasten his conquest of Mino. Upon hearing this, Shizuku finally understands the reason behind his enthusiasm. She has unknowingly contributed to military affairs, and naturally, such contributions would delight him. The Lord goes on to praise her achievements. Her success in cultivating shiitake mushrooms where everyone else has failed, combined with her ingenuity in producing sugar, is truly remarkable in his eyes. Shizuku humbly expresses her gratitude for his praise. In response, the Lord declares that she deserves a reward. He announces that he is willing to grant her whatever she desires and instructs her to state her wish. Shizuku sincerely thanks him. She reflects on her current circumstances. She already possesses a large residence. Aya serves as a capable helper, and the land under her control is more than sufficient for her needs. However, her thoughts soon turn toward the villagers. After a moment of hesitation, she respectfully asks whether her reward could take the form of a favor rather than a material possession. She worries that such a request may be presumptuous. The Lord immediately replies that he has no objection and encourages her to continue. Shizuku explains that her village has enjoyed abundant harvests during both the previous year and the current one. Unfortunately, crop failures are inevitable and will arrive sooner or later. There are many disasters that even the most advanced agricultural techniques cannot overcome. Among them are torrential rains, droughts, devastating outbreaks of harmful pests, and countless other calamities. In preparation for such emergencies, she wishes to establish reserves of food and supplies through a large-scale farmland reform project. Unfortunately, she lacks the manpower necessary to carry out such an undertaking. Therefore, she respectfully requests the temporary assistance of 200 workers for a period of 1 month. The Lord falls silent and considers her request for a while. Eventually, he remarks that most people ask for money or territory when given such an opportunity. Instead, she is asking for laborers to improve farmland. The thought amuses him greatly. He begins laughing, causing Shizuku's anxiety to rise. The Lord then declares that she is an exceptionally greedy little girl. Last year and this year, she repeatedly claims that she desires nothing for herself. He wonders whether such thinking is also part of the Nanban school of thought. Despite his teasing, he immediately grants her request. Workers are such a trivial matter to him that she may use as many as she desires, whether she requires 200 laborers or even more. He does not mind in the slightest, provided that their efforts are used to increase productivity. Upon hearing this, Shizuku expresses her gratitude. At the same time, she cannot help but wonder whether she has unintentionally raised expectations even higher for herself in the future. Just as she prepares to leave, the Lord instructs Aya to remain behind. As Shizuku departs, she worries about Aya's situation. She hopes Aya will be fine and, if possible, avoid being scolded. However, knowing the Lord's tendency to be unreasonable at times, she cannot entirely dismiss her concerns. In the end, she decides there is little point in worrying about something beyond her control. Either way, she has successfully secured the labor force she needs. Assuming that one worker can effectively manage 1 hectare of land, the project suddenly appears much more feasible. While she is occupied with her plans, someone unexpectedly approaches her and asks what she is writing. The newcomer is a young boy. Shizuku studies him carefully. He appears to be the child of one of the commanders. Notably, he carries no sword, and he has clearly not yet undergone his coming-of-age ceremony. That would place his age below 12. The coming-of-age ceremony, known as Genpuku, has been held since the Nara period. Through this ceremony, a boy is formally recognized as an adult. The exact age varies depending on the era and region. During the Sengoku period, however, boys typically undergo the ceremony between the ages of 12 and 16. As part of the process, they receive new clothing, new hairstyles, and often new names suitable for their status as adults. During the Edo period, the katana comes to be regarded as an extension of the samurai himself. Because of this belief, children are often permitted to carry wakizashi, or short swords, even before completing their coming-of-age ceremonies. The Sengoku period follows a different custom. At that time, the katana serves as proof of adulthood, and children are therefore prohibited from carrying one. The boy observes the document in Shizuku's hands and remarks that whatever she is writing looks very strange. Curious, he asks what exactly it means. Shizuku explains that what she is writing is an equation. The boy's eyes immediately light up with excitement. He eagerly asks whether she knows anything else, perhaps something related to warfare or military tactics. His enthusiasm makes Shizuku realize that such subjects must be his specialty. Unfortunately, military matters are not areas in which she is particularly knowledgeable. At the same time, she cannot afford to treat the child of a commander rudely. She quickly searches for a way to redirect the conversation. After thinking for a moment, she explains that while the material she is writing is not from any military text, there is an excellent treatise on warfare from the Ming Dynasty known as The Art of War by Sun Tzu. She further explains that the Ming Dynasty possesses many other military texts as well, and together they are known as the 7 military classics. The boy quickly loses interest in the formal explanations. He impatiently dismisses the names and urges her to simply explain the strategies. Seeing his eagerness, Shizuku decides to share a famous quotation from Sun Tzu. The quote states that the greatest victory is achieved without fighting. The boy immediately becomes confused and questions what such a statement could possibly mean. Shizuku patiently explains that even if a commander achieves complete victory in 100 battles, that still does not represent the highest form of strategy. According to Sun Tzu, the finest strategy is to shatter the enemy's morale before battle ever begins. If victory can be achieved without fighting, neither side suffers casualties, and enemy soldiers can be captured unharmed. She continues by explaining that those who stand at the top should not attempt to solve every problem through force alone. A true leader must proceed carefully and consider every available option. As she speaks, she privately thinks that such lessons are important and should be taken to heart. Suddenly, the boy notices someone calling for him. He turns back toward Shizuku and remarks that the quotation was quite interesting. Curious about the person who shared it with him, he asks for her name. Shizuku politely introduces herself. The boy responds by expressing his hope that they will meet again in the future. Just as Shizuku asks whether he could tell her his own name as well, he suddenly runs off before answering. The boy soon joins an older man waiting nearby. The older man immediately scolds him for wandering around on his own again, warning that the Lord will become angry if he continues acting so recklessly. However, the boy merely laughs. As he starts running once more, he cheerfully repeats the lesson he has just learned, declaring that one must win without fighting. The elderly man hurriedly chases after him and calls for him to wait. In the process, he addresses the boy as Kiyomaru-sama. In truth, the boy is none other than the Lord's eldest son, who will later become known as Oda Nobutada. The scene then shifts elsewhere. The Lord is now speaking with Aya. Before him rests the item that has become the subject of discussion. Aya confirms that it is indeed the object in question and explains that Shizuku lent it to her without the slightest objection. This borrowed item is a weapon. Its name is the crossbow. The Lord carefully examines the unfamiliar weapon before him. His expression is filled with suspicion as he studies the strange device. Even though the weather is growing colder and it is still nighttime, everyone leaves their houses and gathers on a hill. It is the 15th day of the new year. Shizuku stands before the villagers and wishes everyone a happy new year. The villagers cheerfully tell the village chief that she should drink together with them. The new year is originally an occasion to worship one's ancestors. However, due to the influence of Buddhism and other cultural traditions, it gradually becomes a time to welcome Toshigami, the year god, who is said to bring happiness to every household. The pine decorations known as kadomatsu serve as vessels for the year god. The decorative shimenawa mark sacred and purified spaces, while kagami mochi are prepared as offerings for the year god. While the celebration continues, Aya calls out to Shizuku and informs her that a messenger has arrived. The messenger respectfully states that he has come bearing a message from the Lord. Noticing the cold weather, Shizuku first shows concern for the messenger's condition. She explains that she has prepared persimmon leaf tea for him. There is both a hot cup and a lukewarm one, and if he is thirsty, he should drink the lukewarm tea first. After drinking it, the messenger remarks that it truly hits the spot and expresses his gratitude for her hospitality. Only then does he return to the matter at hand. He conveys the Lord's message that a banquet for his retainers will be held tomorrow, and the Lord wishes for Shizuku to attend. For the occasion, she is also instructed to bring the bow known as the kurosubu. Upon hearing this, Shizuku asks Aya whether the bow has already been returned. Aya confirms that it has. This immediately causes Shizuku to wonder how the Lord even knows about the existence of such a thing. The next day, on January 2nd, preparations for the banquet begin. Banquets within samurai society are, in many ways, comparable to parties within modern high society in terms of formality. Failing to observe proper etiquette would reflect poorly on the Lord as the host. To avoid causing any embarrassment, Shizuku chooses to wear the proper formal attire expected of a commander. Unfortunately, the gazes directed at her are painfully uncomfortable. She cannot help but wonder whether the reason is her cross-dressing, or perhaps simply the difference in height between herself and everyone else. After formally greeting the Lord, Shizuku is guided to her assigned seat. The moment she sees the seating arrangement, she begins questioning it internally. Shouldn't everyone be seated according to rank and importance, with those of the highest standing positioned closest to the Lord? Nearest to him sits the head of the Oda family unit, and the widely renowned veteran of countless campaigns, Sakuma Nobumori. Beside him is one of the leaders of the Oda Heavenly Kings, Takigawa Kazumasu. Also present is the strongest general of the Oda clan, Shibata Katsuie. Another of the Oda clan's 5 great generals, Niwa Nagahide, is seated nearby. The future ruler of all Japan, Kinoshita Tokichiro, is likewise among those present. And then there is Shizuku. The moment she realizes where she is seated, she feels as though her stomach desperately needs medicine. The meal proceeds almost entirely in silence, making her wish more than ever that she could simply return home. Yet, just as she thought during the few previous occasions on which she met him, she can clearly sense how the extraordinary talent known as the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven can be simultaneously strict regarding etiquette, while also displaying remarkable elegance in his conduct. It makes her think about a forgotten piece of history. Perhaps the rumors claiming that the Tokugawa family intentionally painted the Lord in a negative light in order to elevate their own standing are not entirely false after all. Partway through the banquet, the Lord addresses her directly. He inquires whether she has enjoyed the banquet. Shizuku immediately responds that she lacks the words to properly express her gratitude for being invited to such an occasion. The Lord remarks that he looks forward to taking her words at face value. Then, before anything else, he informs her that she needs to drink. Internally, Shizuku desperately wishes she could simply admit that she dislikes alcohol. Of course, there is no way she could ever say such a thing aloud. Compared to the refined sake she prefers, this drink feels much closer to unrefined sake. Nevertheless, she drinks it. Afterward, she politely states that it is delicious. The Lord comments that she possesses an excellent way of drinking. He notes that the selkasek is sweet and smooth, though traces of yeast remain within its aroma. After that, he asks whether she has brought the item he requested. Shizuku confirms that she has. The Lord appears pleased and declares that it is splendid. He then announces that it is time for entertainment. The event chosen for amusement is an archery contest. The rules are simple. Each participant will fire 10 arrows, and whoever strikes the target the greatest number of times will be declared the winner. The moment Shizuku hears this, she feels as though a circus performance is about to begin, and silently wishes that someone, anyone, would spare her from the ordeal. The Lord takes the first shot. His arrow flies straight into the center of the target. Seeing it, Shizuku cannot help but be impressed. It truly looks as though he trains diligently every day. Once he finishes, the Lord announces that it is now her turn. Shizuku thinks that her performance will probably look boring by comparison. More than anything, she simply wants to finish quickly and return home. However, the moment she draws the kurosubo and releases her arrow, the result is astonishing. The shot is absolutely magnificent. Everyone watches in disbelief. They can hardly believe that the arrow passes completely through the target. Meanwhile, Shizuku is internally begging everyone not to stare at her like that. Despite being operable using only her slender arms, the bow demonstrates tremendous power. The Lord immediately orders his men to bring out another target. This time, the target is a suit of armor. The Lord fires once again. The shot lands cleanly. Then Shizuku follows with her own shot. Both attacks strike successfully. At that point, Shizuku begins wondering whether the Lord is becoming angry. The Lord then calls out to her. He asks her to attempt drawing a different bow. When she tries, she discovers that she is completely unable to do so. The Lord concludes that she may stop thinking of herself as someone incapable of using a bow. Despite possessing knowledge capable of shaking the very foundations of a nation, she remains surprisingly ignorant regarding many of the most common matters. Furthermore, she has no desire to stand out. Neither does she recklessly boast about her accomplishments or offer unnecessary opinions. To think that such a person would prove so convenient and useful to have around. In the end, the contest is officially declared a draw. Following that decision, the Lord instructs her to leave the kurosubo in his possession. Shizuku obediently agrees. Afterward, a private meeting is held. The Lord discusses Shizuku with his retainers. He observes that every single one of her creations is strange. After all, anyone can create something merely for the sake of creating it. However, when those creations produce results of this magnitude, they can no longer be ignored. The Lord specifically turns the discussion toward the nanban bow. Although the weapon appears easy to use, its structure is far too complicated. Addressing his subordinates, he states that if the structure can be simplified while preserving its effectiveness, it would become an invaluable weapon. He therefore orders them to simplify the design and manufacture 30 additional bows. They are to ensure that all 30 are prepared before the next war begins. The Lord then directs another order toward Niwa Nagahide. Niwa is instructed to train 30 soldiers in the use of the weapon. Finally, he turns to Yoshinari. He commands him to extract more information regarding the Ming dynasty's art of war from Shizuku. No matter what it takes, the Lord intends to obtain it. Not only the military strategies she possesses, but also all of her military knowledge. It is February 15, 1565. Under normal circumstances, this would be a season of relative leisure for farmers, a brief period during which they could rest before the next cycle of demanding agricultural labor began. However, such peace does not exist for Shizuku. Her days remain as busy as ever, because the Lord has entrusted her with a new and formidable assignment. The Lord issues a series of ambitious orders, centered around the expansion of Shizuku Village into a major production base. The requirements are extensive and demanding. The settlement is expected to produce 500 bales of rice, 3 tons of soybeans, and 30 kilograms of brown sugar. In addition to these agricultural products, several other supplies intended for military use are also included among the primary objectives of the command. At the same time, construction work has already begun on defensive facilities designed to protect the growing base. The project proceeds rapidly, reflecting the strategic importance the Lord has placed on the area. To further strengthen the settlement, 150 additional people are assigned to the village. During times of peace, they are expected to work as farmers and contribute to agricultural production. However, in the event of war, they are also required to serve as soldiers. This dual role makes them an important part of the Lord's plans for the region. Furthermore, an additional force of 300 soldiers is stationed at the village. Their primary responsibility is escort and security duty, ensuring the safety of the production base and maintaining order within the surrounding area. Several villages are also established around Shizuku Village, with the purpose of spreading the agricultural techniques and knowledge that Shizuku has introduced. The Lord clearly intends for her methods to influence a much wider region, rather than remaining limited to a single settlement. As part of this effort, educational gatherings and study sessions are organized so that villagers can learn from her innovations. However, when the scheduled time arrives, Shizuku finds herself staring at an empty room. Confused, she wonders why nobody has come to attend. At that moment, someone calls out to her and informs her that everyone has already assembled. Startled by the announcement, she immediately asks where they are gathered. The answer leaves her speechless. The attendees are all waiting in a different room. On another occasion, Shizuku receives a group of unexpected visitors. Looking at them, she wonders whether they are reservists or some other group she has not been informed about. The constant confusion surrounding schedules and communications only adds to her growing frustration. Yet on another day, a lone participant arrives and proudly remarks that it appears he is the first person to attend. Shizuku can only stare in disbelief before explaining that the session had actually taken place the previous day. Incidents like these make her increasingly aware of a serious problem. If communication continues to fail so frequently, the resulting misunderstandings could negatively affect farming operations. Poor coordination could easily lead to major losses in production and potentially cause severe damage throughout the region. As she reflects on the situation, she cannot help comparing it to her previous life. Email and telephone systems suddenly seem like miraculous inventions. The ability to instantly exchange information across great distances would solve countless problems. Since such technology does not exist in this era, she begins searching for some alternative method that might serve a similar purpose. While she is lost in thought, a familiar figure approaches. It is the boy Nobutada from earlier. Curious about her actions, he asks what she is doing. Shizuku casually refers to him as Chamaru. The name is completely fabricated and serves merely as a playful nickname rather than his real identity. Unknown to her, Nobutada has been given a specific mission. He has been instructed to gather information from Shizuku regarding the military knowledge and strategic principles associated with the Ming dynasty. Yoshinari firmly believes that Shizuku will eventually open up to the boy. However, he also recognizes a potential obstacle. If she discovers that Nobutada is actually the Lord's son, her behavior toward him may change significantly. For that reason, Nobutada must conceal his true status. Nobutada immediately accepts the task without hesitation and confidently declares that he has no objections. He assures them that they can leave everything to him. As time passes, he begins visiting Shizuku Manor on a regular basis. At first, many of the villagers remain cautious and suspicious of the young newcomer. Gradually, however, their wariness fades, and they come to recognize him as a familiar presence around Shizuku. During one of his visits, Shizuku explains that she does not actually know very much about the subjects he frequently asks about. She has already shared most of what she knows and is beginning to run out of things to tell him. Nobutada, however, arrives with a new question. Rather than discussing farming or administration, he asks how she would go about conquering Japan if she desired to do so. The sudden topic catches Shizuku completely off guard. She cannot help wondering where such an outrageous question has come from. In her mind, discussions about nationwide conquest seem far too advanced for children his age. Nevertheless, Nobutada remains serious and insists upon hearing her thoughts. He explains that every true man dreams of conquering the entire country at least once. When he was younger, he believed victory was simple. He imagined that by continuously fighting battles, cutting down enemies, and accumulating victories, he would eventually place the entire nation under his control. However, the more he studies military strategy, including the principles she previously discussed regarding the art of war and similar subjects, the more he realizes that such a simplistic approach is insufficient. Nobutada continues to wonder what other path he should take. Lately, thoughts of strategy, conquest, and the future have been constantly occupying his mind. Observing this, Shizuku concludes that he truly is a child born for the way of the warrior. In her view, if she were placed in his position, her first objective would be to seize Kyoto and then lavish the surrounding farming villages with such prosperity that they would become completely dependent upon her rule. Her reasoning is straightforward. By taking Kyoto, she would be able to restore the authority of the emperor and demonstrate to the entire country that the magnificence of the imperial house had not yet faded. Throughout history, samurai society has placed enormous importance on pedigree and legitimacy. A noble lineage alone is often enough to attract powerful warriors to a daimyo's banner. Because of this obsession with ancestry, the family trees of many famous warriors of the era are often surprisingly tangled and irregular. Yet standing at the very summit of all pedigrees is the imperial family itself. After restoring imperial authority, her next step would be to secure an appointment as shogun directly from the emperor. Once invested with such legitimacy, almost no one in the country would possess the grounds to oppose her openly. Nobutada considers her proposal carefully. While he does not wish to dismiss her idea outright, he admits that he does not believe the emperor still carries such overwhelming influence. In his eyes, the current situation resembles that of the fallen Muromachi shogunate, whose authority has greatly diminished. However, Shizuku views the matter differently. A regime that has existed for only a few hundred years cannot easily compare with a family whose history stretches back roughly 1,000 years. In an age where lineage and legitimacy remain deeply respected, the emperor's value in the eyes of the people is likely far greater than Nobutada realizes. As he listens, Nobutada cannot help noticing that Shizuku occasionally speaks as though she possesses knowledge from another world. Her perspective often feels strangely detached from the common understanding of their era. He then recalls her earlier remark about spoiling the farming villages and becomes curious about what she truly meant by it. Shizuku begins analyzing the composition of a typical army. She points out that armies are not made entirely of dedicated warriors. When considering those who fight purely for honor, glory, and military achievement, they usually account for only a small portion of the total force, perhaps around 20%. Nobutada reflects on this estimate and turns his thoughts toward the remaining majority. Shizuku explains that most of the rest are effectively reservists, ordinary people who take up arms when required. Many of them are farmers by trade, spending the majority of their lives cultivating the land rather than fighting on battlefields. Nobutada immediately recognizes the truth of her statement and acknowledges that such men are indeed often farmers. Building upon that point, Shizuku explains that these people generally fight not for honor, but for survival. They answer the call to arms because warfare provides income, food, or some means of supporting their families. If someone were to ensure that they were already well-clothed, well-fed, and living comfortably, then their motivation to risk their lives in battle would gradually disappear. Once their needs were fully satisfied, many of them would no longer feel compelled to answer military summons. The realization strikes Nobutada with considerable force. He becomes astonished as he finally understands the deeper meaning behind her proposal. Rather than defeating an enemy solely through force of arms, it may be possible to undermine their military strength by removing the reasons their soldiers choose to fight in the first place. In that sense, victory could be achieved without direct confrontation. Shizuku regards the idea as simply another aspect of warfare. To her, war without fighting is still war. Nevertheless, she finds the discussion immensely enjoyable. The entire exchange leaves a strong impression on Nobutada as well. He cannot help being fascinated by how naturally she speaks about conquering an entire country. The sophistication of her ideas makes him wonder whether she might actually belong to some extraordinarily important family. Later, Shizuku heads toward the bath while continuing to think about future plans. One particular issue occupies her mind: the need for an effective communication network. Such a system would be essential if large territories were ever to be managed efficiently. Yet as she reflects on the concept, she feels that an important piece of the puzzle is missing. While pondering the problem, she suddenly experiences a moment of realization. Her attention fixes upon a particular detail, and she begins questioning whether what she is seeing is genuinely possible or merely an illusion that seems too perfect to be real. Her thoughts turn toward telephones. Their usefulness lies in the ability to speak directly with a specific individual, regardless of distance. However, that convenience only exists because the caller can accurately identify the intended recipient. The entire system depends upon distinguishing one person from another, and that distinction is made possible through something extremely simple yet indispensable: a telephone number. The moment Shizuku's thoughts reach the subject of telephone numbers, a sudden realization strikes her. Her eyes widen, and she immediately jumps to her feet. At last, she understands what has been missing all this time. Unable to contain her excitement, she loudly declares that she has finally figured it out. Without wasting a second, she calls for Aya and urgently requests ink and paper. Aya, startled by the sudden outburst, asks her to calm down first and explain what has happened. However, Shizuku insists that she is perfectly calm. According to her, there is no time to waste. She needs to send a message to the Lord immediately because they are about to become extremely busy. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Nobutada is hurrying through the village when something unusual catches his attention. His gaze falls upon a large board that certainly had not been there during his previous visit. Confused, he stares at it and wonders when such a thing was installed. As he observes the area, he notices villagers carrying papers and exchanging information. One man asks another whether a document can be delivered to a certain district. The second man wonders if it originated from Asamachi, but the first corrects him and explains that it actually came from Kinokomachi. Apparently, Matazu from Mizomachi has recently welcomed a newborn child into his family. Upon hearing the news, the other villager enthusiastically suggests that they should visit and celebrate the occasion. Listening to these casual exchanges leaves Nobutada astonished. In only a short period of time, the village has changed so dramatically that it almost feels like a completely different place. Information is flowing from person to person with surprising efficiency, and people appear to know details about residents living in distant parts of the settlement. Convinced that something extraordinary is happening, Nobutada rushes to find Shizuku. Upon locating her, he immediately informs her that there seems to be something strange going on in the village. However, before he can continue, he notices that everyone around her is busy writing on sheets of paper. Curious, he asks what exactly is taking place. Shizuku explains that, as should be obvious from the scene, they are creating family registers. Family registers are a system designed to record citizens according to family units. Historically, such systems are relatively rare. Although there were differences in implementation, China and Japan were among the few nations that developed family registration systems that survived into the modern age. In Japan, during the Taika reforms, nationwide family registers were established under the Kogo registration system. These records remained in use until the early Heian period, before gradually falling into disuse as governmental structures changed. It would not be until the Meiji era that a system resembling the modern family register would emerge once again. The project underway in the village extends beyond simple family registration. Signboards and information boards are being placed throughout the settlement, displaying locations and addresses. At the same time, residents are recording information regarding land ownership and property boundaries. The result is a comprehensive system that allows people to identify exactly who lives where and what land belongs to whom. Nobutada quickly realizes the implications. In essence, the entire operation is a method of determining the location and identity of every resident within the territory. The local lord, after receiving Shizuku's proposal, immediately recognized the potential value of such a system. Family registers would provide a far clearer understanding of the population under his rule. They would also make it considerably more difficult for spies and infiltrators to enter unnoticed. Because of these advantages and many others, he dispatched a large workforce along with enormous quantities of paper to assist in the effort. A functioning society requires accurate knowledge of where its people are located. Thanks to these registers, that particular problem is finally being addressed. Nevertheless, despite this progress, countless other tasks still remain. As he watches the operation unfold, Nobutada becomes increasingly puzzled by Shizuku's behavior. He cannot understand why she willingly spreads such valuable knowledge. If he possessed ideas of this magnitude, he believes he would keep them to himself and monopolize all the credit and rewards. Shizuku, however, sees the situation differently. She explains that agricultural productivity will continue to increase as these innovations spread. Eventually, neighboring domains and rival states will notice the remarkable improvements. Once that happens, they will inevitably investigate the source of the changes. If they discover that a single individual is responsible for driving all of these advancements, that person would become an obvious target. Enemy states might attempt to kidnap, eliminate, or otherwise remove her in order to halt the progress. For that reason, she deliberately shares her knowledge as widely as possible. The more people who understand these techniques, the less dependent society becomes on any one individual. Even if something were to happen to her, the productivity of the land would continue to grow uninterrupted. After presenting this perfectly logical explanation, she suddenly adds a playful wink and claims that she is only joking. More than any recognition or achievement, she values her own life. Protecting herself is far more important than accumulating merit or glory. Having finished her explanation, she shifts the conversation and asks Nobutada whether there is anything he personally wants. At that very moment, news begins spreading elsewhere. Someone arrives carrying a major report and announces that significant developments have occurred. The Lord has already succeeded in conquering both Eastern Mino and Western Mino. With those victories secured, all signs now indicate that his next objective will be the heart of the region itself. According to the report, the Lord's attention is now turning towards Central Mino. It is now March of 1567, and the Lord finally sets out to conquer central Minino. Battles rage across the region as every soldier throws himself into the campaign. The Oda army attempts to seize the enemy castle through direct assault, but they find themselves at a clear disadvantage. Recognizing the situation, the Lord orders a withdrawal. Under his command, the troops pull back and retreat from the battlefield. Believing that the Oda army poses little threat, the defenders become confident and move to eliminate the retreating force. However, the Lord remains calm. Having anticipated their reaction, he remarks that the reports were accurate and that the enemy has taken the bait completely. Soon, one of his men informs him that they have reached the designated position. At once, he orders the archers to take aim. The sudden command catches the enemy completely off guard. Moments later, the order to fire is given, and a deadly volley is unleashed upon them. Without hesitation, the Lord follows up by commanding his troops to advance in a dense formation and apply relentless pressure. At the same time, he orders the castle gates to be shut quickly so that no enemy soldiers can slip inside. Even as the battle unfolds in his favor, he acknowledges that Inabayama Castle will not fall so easily. Yoshinari agrees with the assessment, though he notes one weakness of the Kurasubu crossbow: its rate of fire. In order to increase its power and make it suitable for mass production, Shizuku had strengthened the bow itself. As a result, a winding mechanism became necessary to span the crossbow before firing. While gathering 10 highly skilled archers is a difficult task, this new weapon can be mastered by almost anyone with only a small amount of training. Although its range is shorter than that of a traditional bow, it offers numerous advantages that more than compensate for that shortcoming. As Yoshinari studies the weapon, he begins considering additional possibilities. He wonders whether it could be used to launch objects other than arrows. What stands out most to him is how dramatically the Lord's style of warfare is changing. The Lord has adopted the strategies and inventions introduced by Shizuku, organized them logically, and integrated them directly into military operations. What truly astonishes Yoshinari is the speed with which the Lord understands the practical applications of these innovations. Not only does he grasp their intended uses immediately, but he also develops entirely new tactics around them. The results are undeniable. The weapons and strategies consistently produce victories on the battlefield. Even so, the Lord remains unsatisfied. He observes that the execution of the dance formation still lacks sufficient skill and discipline. Determined to perfect it, he instructs Yoshinari to ensure that the soldiers continue their training. Hearing this, Yoshinari cannot help but wonder just how great the Lord will become in the future. Meanwhile, away from the battlefield, another innovation is transforming daily life. Farmers are introduced to a new agricultural tool, and many are amazed by how simple and effective it is. The tool is a garden fork equipped with a handle, designed around the principle of leverage so that it reduces strain on the user's back. Although such a tool would not be developed until the Taisho era, Shizuku has already introduced it to the villages. She distributes 30 of these tools to every village under their control. Naturally, the manufacturing is handled by Kinzu, the same craftsman responsible for producing the crossbows. To support the increasing workload, several blacksmiths and woodworkers are gathered together and become apprentices under him. Their combined efforts lead to the official establishment of the Kinzu workshop. Despite its new status, the workshop consists of only around 10 people. The craftsmen must complete the production of large numbers of crossbows while simultaneously manufacturing farming equipment. Balancing both responsibilities proves to be an extremely demanding and unreasonable task. The townspeople, however, know little about the hardships behind the scenes. They are already surprised that their new chief is a woman, but their astonishment grows even greater when they learn that she is also the inventor of such remarkable tools. News of her achievements spreads rapidly among the people. They hear that she has created many other useful inventions as well, and that her contributions have significantly increased agricultural yields throughout the region. Rumors about Shizuku continue to spread throughout the villages and towns. The people have already heard about the farming tools and various inventions she has introduced, but the stories do not end there. Many have also heard that she played a role in creating new weapons, an accomplishment that they consider extraordinary. Others speak of even stranger tales, claiming that wolves obey her commands as though they were loyal retainers. As these stories circulate, the villagers can only wonder what kind of person she truly is. Meanwhile, Shizuku continues working on yet another project. Confident in her latest creation, she assures Abon that everything will work as intended. Curious about the unfamiliar objects before him, he examines them closely. The first is a sundial. The second is a calendar. For Shizuku, these inventions solve another major problem that has long plagued society. The issue of identifying who belongs where had already been addressed through family registration systems. The next challenge is determining when events are supposed to happen. To accomplish that, everyone must share the same understanding of time. In this era, timekeeping is far from standardized. Various methods exist, such as dividing the day and night into 6 portions each, or measuring time through the ringing of hourly bells. However, such systems are unreliable in rural communities where bell towers are uncommon. Most villagers simply divide their days into morning, daytime, and night. As a result, misunderstandings occur constantly. Even when people are instructed to gather at noon, many do not arrive until evening. Precise scheduling is practically impossible. The introduction of the sundial changes everything. People no longer need to rely solely on instinct or vague feelings to determine the time. A more consistent method becomes available, eliminating a considerable amount of inefficiency. Earlier, when Shizuku petitioned the Lord for permission to construct a bell, he initially assumed that she intended to build a temple. However, once she explained its practical uses for timekeeping and communication, he quickly understood its value and granted approval. With the bell, sundial, and calendar all working together, agricultural schedules become significantly easier to manage. Another major issue lies in the calendar itself. During this period, no universally accepted calendar system exists. Different regions often use different methods of counting dates, creating confusion whenever information travels between communities. To solve this, Shizuku introduces a unified system modeled after the Gregorian calendar commonly used in modern society. Beyond its practical advantages, it also serves as a measure against espionage, since outsiders unfamiliar with the system may struggle to interpret information correctly. More importantly, however, Shizuku simply finds it easier and more intuitive to use. Gradually, through persistent teaching and repeated demonstrations, the villagers begin to understand and adopt the new methods. Around this time, notices also start appearing throughout the surrounding settlements. One particular notice announces the next meeting. It states that the gathering will take place at 13 o'clock on the 16th day at the residence of Motomachi village's chief. At last, a communication network and circular notice system have been established. Bulletin boards are added alongside the town information boards, greatly increasing the amount of information available to everyone. News, schedules, and announcements can now be shared far more efficiently. The results are immediately noticeable. Miscommunication decreases dramatically. As Shizuku observes the growing system, she feels as though a great burden has been lifted from her shoulders. Many of the conveniences people take for granted in the modern world, phones, email, clocks, calendars, addresses, and family registries, perform essential functions that few people stop to appreciate. Recreating even a fraction of those systems in this era has already proven incredibly difficult. Thinking about it deeply, she begins to wonder how much effort humanity's predecessors invested while developing these systems through countless failures and experiments. The realization fills her with genuine respect for those who came before. Sometime later, likely around April, attention turns to the fields. The crops currently being harvested are valuable because they can be grown during both spring and autumn. Those gathered during the spring season, known as haroku, are especially prized. As Shizuku walks through the fields, she carefully examines the harvest. Some crops appear excellent, while others fail to meet expectations. She continues inspecting them one by one, satisfied overall with the results. While doing so, she notices that the wolves are trailing behind her. At first, she assumes they are merely accompanying her as usual. However, something feels different today. Rather than behaving casually, the wolves move around her constantly, circling the area and scanning their surroundings. Their behavior immediately catches her attention. The animals seem to be on guard. Realizing this, Shizuku suspects that they have detected an intruder somewhere nearby. She quietly wonders where such a person could be hiding. Without wasting time, she writes a brief message on a wooden plate, informing others about the possible trespasser. She then entrusts the message to one of the wolves and sends it toward the garrison. As she continues investigating, she discovers another troubling sign. Deep within the forest field, the cord used to secure the gate has been cut. Someone has definitely entered the area. Looking ahead, she soon notices a man standing among the trees. Her first thought is that he might be a thief attempting to steal the shiitake mushrooms being cultivated there. However, that theory quickly falls apart. The stranger is wearing heavy armor, far more equipment than any ordinary thief would need. Then she notices something else. A long spear. The sight immediately causes her heart to skip a beat. Could it really be what she thinks it is? Just then, the guards arrive after receiving her warning. They rush to her position and immediately confirm her safety. The wolves also become increasingly aggressive, growling and barking toward the mysterious figure. The guards order the stranger not to move. Meanwhile, Shizuku continues staring at the spear. The weapon appears remarkably distinctive. A possibility begins forming in her mind. The unknown man throws down his spear and declares that he has no intention of fighting. As he is restrained and tied up by the guards, his gaze settles on Shizuku. Meanwhile, one of the guards remarks that the weapon he carried is unusually long and impressive. Shizuku politely asks if she may examine the spear for a moment. After studying it carefully, she quickly realizes what it is. The inscriptions and craftsmanship immediately catch her attention. She identifies it as a Sanskrit-inscribed spear with a Vajra-shaped hilt, a masterpiece forged by Fujiwara Masazane, the renowned blacksmith of the Mikawa Manjushri sector. She further recognizes the weapon as Tonbokiri. The captured man reacts with visible surprise upon hearing that name. He wonders how she could possibly know it. His response immediately alerts Shizuku to his identity. She realizes that the man standing before her can only be the retainer of the Tokugawa family and the famous wielder of Tonbokiri, Honda Heihachi. The scene shifts as the investigation begins. A guard questions him directly, demanding to know why a retainer of the Tokugawa family has appeared in such a place. Honda humbly apologizes and explains that he had simply lost his way and wandered into the territory by mistake. Nevertheless, he openly admits that he entered without following the proper procedures and acknowledges that he has committed a violation. As Shizuku listens, several concerns run through her mind. Not only has he trespassed, but he has also witnessed secrets that should never have been seen by outsiders. However, she remembers that Lord Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu formed the Kyosu alliance 5 years earlier. Because of that important political relationship, Honda is not someone who can be quietly eliminated without consequences. Honda then states that he is prepared to accept whatever punishment awaits him. However, he earnestly asks that no blame be placed upon his lord. He wishes for the incident to be treated solely as his own offense, and not as a matter involving the Tokugawa family. His words leave a strong impression on Shizuku. Even while facing what could potentially be his final moments, he remains unwaveringly loyal. The fact that he thinks only of protecting his lord rather than himself reveals the depth of his devotion and character. The guards decide that they will await the Lord's judgment before making any final decision. Until then, Honda will remain in custody. At that very moment, an unexpected sound interrupts the tense atmosphere. Honda's stomach growls loudly. The sudden noise causes everyone present to burst into laughter, while Honda himself becomes noticeably embarrassed. Seeing the opportunity to lighten the mood, Shizuku mentions that she has recently developed a new onigiri recipe. Since everyone is gathered there, she hopes they will taste it and share their honest opinions. The guards readily agree. Shizuku also expresses her desire to hear Honda's thoughts on it, explaining that his opinion would be especially valuable to her. She presents rice balls made from brown rice and sweet potatoes, accompanied by smoked pickled radishes on the side. The meal is designed to resemble practical field rations while still being satisfying and nutritious. Honda takes a bite. The moment the flavor reaches him, his eyes widen in surprise. He immediately praises the food, declaring it extraordinarily delicious. He admits that after years of eating rice balls during military campaigns, he had long since grown tired of them. Yet the sweetness provided by the yellow sweet potatoes creates a balance he has never experienced before, making the dish remarkably enjoyable. The guards quickly try the meal for themselves and reach the same conclusion. The onigiri truly is delicious. Combined with the smoked pickled radish, the flavor becomes even better. What surprises them most is the strange sense of nostalgia the food evokes. Although they are tasting it for the first time, it somehow reminds them of home and brings back warm memories of their hometowns. Shizuku is delighted by their reactions. Seeing everyone enjoy her creation fills her with happiness. As Honda watches her smile, a thought forms in his mind. He considers her absolutely splendid. Several days pass. Eventually, it is decided that Honda will be transferred to another location where he will remain while awaiting the Lord's final judgment. On the day of his departure, Shizuku approaches him with a gift. She has prepared the smoked pickled radishes he previously requested and hands them over before he leaves. Moved by her kindness, Honda instinctively reaches out and grasps her hand in gratitude. The unexpected gesture catches Shizuku completely by surprise. Realizing what he has done, Honda immediately withdraws and apologizes for his behavior. Once the awkward moment passes, the guards escort him away and continue their journey. As they travel, Honda notices that many of the cherry blossoms have already fallen from the trees. Spring is gradually advancing, and the gentle wind carries countless sakura petals through the air. While watching the drifting blossoms, he reflects quietly to himself. Though the spring breeze scatters the petals across the land, it has also carried something precious into his heart, allowing a new flower to bloom within him. One of the guards notices him murmuring and asks whether he said something. Honda simply dismisses the question and turns his attention back to the falling blossoms. As he gazes at the scenery, he reflects that spring has truly arrived. Later that day, Shizuku relaxes in the bath, finally finding a moment to herself after the countless events that have unfolded. As she soaks in the warm water, she reflects on everything that happened throughout the day. Among all the memorable incidents, Honda's boundless energy stands out particularly strongly in her mind. As her thoughts wander, she suddenly realizes something. She has not seen Nobutada for quite some time. The absence had not seemed unusual at first because everyone had been so busy, but now that she thinks about it carefully, his disappearance has lasted longer than expected. At that moment, Aya enters and informs Shizuku that a visitor has arrived. Curious, Shizuku asks who it might be. Aya explains that the visitor is a member of the Oda clan and serves as the person responsible for Nobutada's education. The information immediately catches Shizuku's attention. She recalls the name Kimyomaru, which was known as Nobutada's childhood name, and begins wondering whether the matter concerns him. When the visitor is brought before her, he wastes no time explaining the situation. Half a month earlier, Nobutada had contracted a severe coughing illness. Unfortunately, despite the passage of time, there has been no sign of recovery. His condition has steadily confined him to bed, and his health has deteriorated to the point where he now wishes to see Shizuku one final time before the end. The shocking announcement leaves Shizuku completely stunned. Her mind races as she struggles to understand what is happening. The situation sounds so sudden and unbelievable that she can scarcely process it. The scene then shifts to Nobutada's residence. The elderly retainer announces that he has successfully brought Shizuku as requested. Upon hearing this, Nobutada slowly rises from his bed and welcomes her. The moment Shizuku sees him clearly, however, she freezes. The person before her is none other than Chimaru. Nobutada apologizes for deceiving her throughout all this time. He explains that his true name is actually Kimyomaru. The revelation strikes Shizuku like a bolt of lightning. She immediately realizes the implication. Kimyomaru is the eldest son of the Lord. Nobutada confirms her suspicion. He explains that among powerful families, it is common practice for important individuals to use multiple names throughout their lives. Such false names help avoid various complications and dangers. Furthermore, childhood names among the ruling class often appear simple or arbitrary, because people believed that granting a child an overly significant name too early might shorten their lifespan. There was also another practical reason. In an era when children were frequently sent away as political hostages, using less meaningful names helped prevent emotional attachment from becoming an obstacle when separation became necessary. After explaining this, Nobutada draws attention to his current state. His body has been ravaged by illness. The dream he once held of succeeding his father and becoming a great ruler now appears impossible. In his eyes, his future has already come to an end. Resigned to his fate, he states that everything remaining must be entrusted to Shizuku. Before anyone can react, Shizuku suddenly strikes him. The elderly retainer immediately cries out in alarm, unable to understand what she is doing. Shizuku, however, refuses to indulge Nobutada's despair. She scolds him sharply, asking why he is acting so timid when such behavior is completely unlike him. Nobutada weakly protests. His throat hurts, his head aches, and everything around him feels as though it is spinning. He explains that countless prayers have been offered and various medicines have been administered, yet nothing has produced results. Rather than accepting hopeless conclusions, Shizuku begins analyzing the situation. She recalls that many illnesses share symptoms similar to those of the common cold. Normally, after a week or so, more specific symptoms should begin to appear and make identification easier. However, Nobutada's symptoms have remained largely unchanged for half a month. Based on that observation, she decides that the most reasonable approach is to treat the illness as a severe common cold until proven otherwise. Without hesitation, she immediately begins issuing instructions. The first step is to place several buckets of water throughout the room. The elderly retainer is bewildered and questions what she hopes to accomplish with such a strange request. Nevertheless, Nobutada orders him to follow Shizuku's instructions exactly as given. Shizuku explains that increasing humidity can help suppress the reproduction of viruses while also preventing further irritation and dryness in the throat. With that issue addressed, she moves on to the next problem. The sweat-soaked clothing must be removed immediately. She explains that his body needs to be cleaned thoroughly and his clothes changed. Allowing damp clothing to remain against his skin risks lowering his body temperature and worsening his condition. Shizuku then begins wiping away the sweat covering his body. She firmly tells him that there is no need to curl up in embarrassment. Even his abdomen needs to be cleaned properly to ensure he remains comfortable. As she continues her treatment, Nobutada can only think about how humiliating the entire situation feels. However, Shizuku pays no attention to his embarrassment. Her sole concern is restoring his health. Finally, she reveals the special meal she has prepared for him. Understanding that proper nutrition is essential for recovery, she has created a digestion-friendly vegetarian dish designed to provide a full range of nutrients while remaining gentle on a weakened body. The meal consists of sweet potato rice, grated ginger, and grilled green onions served in a clear broth. Shizuku explains that all that remains now is plenty of rest and allowing his immune system to do its work. Nobutada wonders whether something so simple could truly cure him. In reality, the common cold is a respiratory illness caused by a virus. Even in the modern era, while medicines exist to suppress the symptoms, there is still no definitive cure. However, discovering the cause of the disease was a major breakthrough, and it greatly reduced the number of incorrect treatments. Shizuku reassures him that everything will be fine and that he simply needs to rest properly. As Nobutada listens to her words, he finds himself wondering why they bring him such a sense of relief. He reflects that if Shizuku had been a man, she would undoubtedly have become his closest friend. At the same time, he realizes that the fact she is a woman may be the only reason they were ever able to meet, despite the vast difference in their social standing. The bonds that connect people truly are mysterious things.